Hi, I'm Marchie, a 32-year-old lawyer living in New York City. Before I get into my story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more wild tales from my life. You won't want to miss what's next. So I'm sitting in my office, swamped with case files, when my phone buzzes. It's Derek, my boyfriend of 2 years, asking me to meet him at our favorite coffee shop. I had no idea my life was about to change. I arrive at the cafe and see Derek looking nervous but excited. He gets down on one knee, pulls out a ring, and says, "Marchie, will you marry me?" I'm speechless for a moment before I shout, "Yes." The whole cafe bursts into applause. A few weeks later, I meet Derek's family for the first time. His dad, Mike, is cool, but his mom, Karen, well, she's a handful. "So, Marchie," Karen says, looking me up and down. "Derek tells me you're a lawyer. Isn't that a bit stressful for a woman?" I force a smile and reply, "Actually, I find it really rewarding. I love helping people with their legal issues." Karen just hums, clearly not impressed. I can tell we're going to have problems. One day, while dress shopping with Karen and my best friend Samantha, things get tense. "I just think white may not be the most suitable color for you, dear," Karen says with a fake smile. I bite my tongue, but Samantha jumps in. "What exactly are you trying to say, Karen?" Karen just shrugs and says, "Oh, nothing. I just thought Marchie might want something more subtle." Later, over drinks, I vent to Samantha. "I don't know what to do, Sam. It feels like she's determined to hate me." Samantha takes a sip of her drink and asks, "Have you talked to Derek about it?" I sigh and say, "I've tried, but he just says she needs time to get used to me. He doesn't see how bad it is." Samantha leans in and says, "Girl, you need to stand up for yourself. Don't let her walk all over you." On my wedding day, I wake up with butterflies in my stomach. This is the day I've always dreamed of. My bridesmaids burst into the room with champagne, and we start getting ready. "You look stunning, Marchie," Samantha says, helping me into my dress. I smile at my reflection, hardly believing this is real. The music starts, and I walk down the aisle. Derek's eyes light up when he sees me, and for a moment, everything is perfect. The minister begins the ceremony, and we exchange loving glances as he speaks. Then he says, "If anyone has any reason why this couple shouldn't be married, speak now or forever hold your peace." Suddenly, a loud voice breaks the silence. I object. "This woman is already married," someone shouts, waving a paper in the air. "She's a bigamist." Gasps and murmurs spread through the crowd. I feel like I'm trapped in a nightmare. "What are you talking about?" I ask, my voice trembling. Karen marches up to the altar and hands the minister a piece of paper. "This is a marriage certificate. Marchie was married 3 years ago in Las Vegas to a man named Robert Johnson. She never divorced him." The minister examines the document, his brow furrowed. This appears to be authentic. I stare at the paper, shocked. "That's impossible. I've never been married. I've never even been to Las Vegas." Derek turns to me, his face filled with confusion and hurt. "Marchie, what's going on? Is this true?" "Of course not." I cry, tears forming in my eyes. "Derek, you have to believe me. This is a mistake." But I can see doubt creeping into his eyes. The whispers from the guests grow louder, and I can feel them staring at me. "I think we need to postpone this ceremony," the minister says solemnly. My maid of honor, Samantha, rushes to my side. "This is ridiculous. Marchie would never do something like this." But Karen is relentless. "The evidence is right there. She's been lying to all of us, especially you, Derek. I told you she wasn't good enough for this family." "I need some time to think," Derek says, walking away. "How could you keep this from me?" "I didn't keep anything from you," I plead, tears streaming down my face. "This is all the lie." I turn to Karen. "Why are you doing this?" Karen gives me a fake sympathetic look. "I'm just trying to protect my son from a deceitful woman." Samantha grabs my shoulders. "Marchie, listen to me. We're going to figure this out. This has to be a mistake or a setup." I nod numbly, still staring at the doors Derek just walked out of. How could this be happening? How could he not believe me? As the church empties, I'm left standing there in my wedding dress, surrounded by wilting flowers and discarded programs. The happiest day of my life has turned into a nightmare, and I have no idea how to fix it. Samantha hugs me tightly. "Come on, let's get you out of here. We'll get to the bottom of this, I promise." As we leave the church, I see Karen watching me with a smug smile. In that moment, I know this wasn't an accident. Somehow, she's behind this, and I'm going to prove it, no matter what it takes. The days after the wedding disaster are a blur of tears and sleepless nights. But as the shock fades, determination takes over. I'm not giving up without a fight. Sam, I need your help, I tell her. I'm telling you, we have to prove that marriage certificate is fake, I say, pacing around my living room. Samantha nods, her lawyer instincts kicking in. We'll need a professional for this. I know a guy, Mike. He's a private investigator and can dig deeper than we can. We meet Mike at a small rundown diner. He's all business, taking notes as we explain what happened. First things first, Mike says. We need to trace the origin of this certificate. I've got contacts in Vegas who can help. Days go by, and we slowly start putting the pieces together. Mike's contact confirms the marriage certificate is a forgery, but it's a really good one. We're looking for a pro, Mike explains. Someone with serious skills and access to the right equipment. Then, Samantha remembers something. Wait, didn't Karen mention a friend who could get anything done at that awkward family dinner? It's a long shot, but it's all we have. Mike works his magic, and soon we have a name. Jack Thompson, a local forger who's known for his skills. Tracking him down isn't easy, but Mike's persistence pays off. We finally find Jack in a shabby apartment on the outskirts of town. Inside, Jack is nervous, his eyes darting between us. I get straight to the point. We know you forged the marriage certificate for Karen. Prove it wasn't you, or we'll go to the authorities. Jack's face turns pale. Look, I didn't know what she was planning. She said it was for a prank. A prank? I say furious. She ruined my wedding. Jack quickly scrambles to his computer. I have proof. I record all my transactions just in case. He pulls up a video, and there's Karen, clear as day, handing him cash and telling him exactly what she wanted on the certificate. Mike steps in. We'll need you to transfer that to us, he says, his voice firm. Jack nods quickly. Take it, just don't turn me in, okay? As we leave, Samantha turns to me. This is huge, Marchie. But why would Karen go to such extremes? The answer comes as we dig deeper. Mike uncovers a pattern. A trail of forged documents and manipulated evidence, all tied to Derek's past relationships. Karen has been doing this for years. I'm horrified as I realize the truth. Anytime Derek got serious with someone, Karen found a way to ruin it. But the final piece of the puzzle is the most shocking. Mike discovers that Karen is deeply in debt, living a lavish lifestyle funded by loans she can't repay. She's after Derek's trust fund, Samantha concludes. If he marries you, she loses control. It all makes sickening sense. Karen isn't just a controlling mother. She's desperate and dangerous. We've got her, Mike says, his voice full of satisfaction. This is more than enough to clear your name. But as the excitement fades, doubt starts to creep in. How do I even begin to confront Karen with this? And will Derek believe me now, after everything? Samantha squeezes my hand. One step at a time. We've got the truth on our side. I nod, trying to calm my nerves. The path ahead is clear but dangerous. Confronting Karen could tear Derek's family apart. But staying silent would mean living under the weight of her lies. We have to do this, I say firmly. It's time to take Karen down. The day of reckoning finally arrives. I've spent countless hours preparing, planning every detail. As I walk into Derek's family home, my heart races, but my resolve is strong. Karen's smug smile fades when she sees me. What is she doing here? She asks, clearly surprised. I take a deep breath. I'm here to reveal the truth, Karen. The room falls silent as I spread out documents on the coffee table. This is the forged marriage certificate you used to ruin my wedding, I say, holding up a USB drive. And this is video evidence of you paying for the forgery. Karen's face turns pale. That's ridiculous. You can't prove anything. I play the video and Karen's voice fills the room, instructing the forger on exactly what to write. Derek stands up, his face a mix of shock and anger. Mom, what the hell? I explain, Karen has been sabotaging your relationships for years, all to maintain control over your trust fund. She's deeply in debt and was scared that if you married me, she'd lose access to your money. Karen's demeanor shifts instantly and she starts sobbing. I was just trying to protect you, sweetie. But her act falls flat. Detective Johnson steps forward. Karen Miller, you're under arrest for forgery, fraud, and defamation. As Karen is led away in handcuffs, Derek approaches me, his eyes filled with regret. Marchie, I'm so sorry. I should have believed you. Can you ever forgive me? I look at him, seeing the man I thought I'd marry. But that image quickly fades. I'm sorry, Derek, what now? You didn't trust me when it mattered most. That's not something I can forgive. I realize I can't just get over it. Derek nods, understanding but heartbroken. As I leave, I feel a weight lifting off my shoulders. It's finally over. 6 months later, I'm in my office when my phone buzzes with a news alert. Karen has been sentenced to 5 years in prison. I lean back, reflecting on everything that's happened. The betrayal, the fight for justice. It's all led me here. I'm stronger now, wiser. I've thrown myself into challenging legal cases and started mentoring young lawyers. As I look out at the city below, I smile. Karen thought she could break me, but she only made me unbreakable. I don't know what the future holds, but I'm ready for it. My phone rings, a new client. I answer with confidence, Mara speaking. How can I help you? As I listen to their story, that familiar fire ignites inside me. Another battle for justice, another chance to make things right. This is what I was meant to do, and I wouldn't have it any other way. That's the end of Marchie's story. Now, I want to hear from you. Was Marchie right to reject Derek's apology, or should she have given him a second chance? Is trust, once broken, truly impossible to repair in a relationship? Drop your thoughts in the comments and let's get a real discussion going about forgiveness, trust, and where we draw the line in relationships. If this story got you thinking, hit that like button and subscribe for more thought-provoking content. Your engagement helps keep these stories coming. See you in the next video.
I am the youngest of 4 children sisters, 36, 34, 30, and me, 27. My 30-year-old sister, Lisa, physically and emotionally abused me. She would pick on me at school to curry favor with her classmates. It started with her calling me names and then escalated by the 5th grade. She pantsed me in front of a group of girls, exposing my private bits to a group of female friends. While I was young, she would beat me up, and on more than one occasion, she would leave me bloody. When I was bigger than her and when she couldn't physically overpower me, she began spreading horrible rumors, including things about my purported homosexuality, bestiality, and sexual deviance. The teachers took her side, including the school's disciplinarian. They felt that I was making this up because she was a great student. I was also a student. My sister consistently denied the accusations to my parents. My sister would play innocent at home and cry about how I was so mean to her and would go out of her way to be nice to me at home. Fortunately, my parents didn't buy it and eventually sent me to a different school to avoid her. My parents could never prove what she had done and were stonewalled by school officials who didn't see the bullying. Since the school was no help, my parents separated us and would routinely ensure that at home we were separated. She was even put in therapy, but she still would never admit to anything. Even though they opted to send me to a different school in the same city, but I couldn't bring friends over because she would quickly tell anyone about my personality. Because of the abuse, my sister was phenomenally popular at school. She was basically treated like royalty by people who'd ask what weird shit I had done on the weekend. If I wore a new shirt to school, she'd tell classmates that I was trying to fit in, so they'd amp up the abuse. Fortunately, this was before the rise of social media. I left for university across the country, and it was transformative. I could be myself. My parents put me into therapy while I was at school, and I had to work on some issues, including trust and body issues, some of which I still have. A few years after high school, she eventually came clean to a therapist and admitted to my family what she had done to me. My family was horrified. My oldest sisters had routinely thought I was making this up, and while they wouldn't engage in the abuse, would never take my side or protect me. Consequently, I am close to my parents, but I could easily go the rest of my life without seeing my sisters. My oldest sister, Sarah, has made frequent attempts to reconcile, as have my other sisters. I got married last year, finished my graduate education law school, and started working. My wife Audrey and I decided to elope, where we only invited parents and had a quick ceremony. Due to an unforeseen condom incident, where I went in without a helmet, we got pregnant and had a beautiful daughter. Problem is, my sister Lisa and other sisters not only want to make amends, but to meet our daughter. I came home from work, and my wife was sitting at the dinner table. She was reading a letter and asked me to sit down. My sister Lisa had written a long letter. Audrey wanted to read it first in case it was more of her craziness. In it, she outlined that she had been abused by someone outside of our family. She wrote about how she had ruined my life and relations with my sisters. She apparently had a sit-down with my family and told them everything and wanted to approach me before they told me what was going on. I read the letter and felt very little. Mostly disdain for her. My wife booked a couples therapy session. The therapist asked that we speak alone, and we talked. I told her the extent of my sister's abuse and to what degree she had haunted my youth. The therapist was helpful, but did recommend that I work on my issues some more. Felt like a money grab, and that I should look within myself to forgive my sister, even if that means I don't pursue a relationship. My wife thinks I should forgive her and that she and my sisters should meet at a public location with the baby. I told my wife that if I'm forced to be near Lisa, I'll simply explode and have refused. Audrey didn't push it then, but has begun applying pressure on me to begin forgiving my sister. My sisters have also stepped up the frequency of emails, letters, and communications through my mother or wife. I got Lisa's email and wrote a formal cease and desist letter warning her that any further communication with me, my wife, or child would result in further legal action. It got back to my wife, who has been really upset with me. I feel like I have every right to keep them out of my life and owe them nothing. My wife thinks I owe my sister, who she feels was deeply traumatized, the ability to apologize to my face. This past weekend, I was out getting some groceries for Audrey. When I arrived home, there was a car in the driveway that I didn't recognize. I went in and found my oldest sister. I was furious. I told her and her husband to get out. I was furious with my wife. We got into a fight, and I told her to never, ever blindside me again or I'd divorce her. She felt bad, but I was so mad I spent the weekend sulking and working in the basement. Honestly, Reddit, I don't know what to do. Everyone is pushing me one way, and I absolutely hate the idea of ever forgiving her. Top comment: my wife thinks I should forgive her, and that she and my sisters should meet at a public location with the baby. Your wife is wrong. If you aren't comfortable, your sister does not see your baby, and your sister is only allowed into your life on your terms. I could write a book on the screwed up relationship my husband and Sil have. She's a two-faced, horrible person who has the entire world eating out of her hand. No one believes she could do the things she's down, and she's flipped the narrative to make herself the victim she isn't. She tried to be all pals once she has kids so our kids could play together. Nope, husband has her on Facebook as a family compromise, but they haven't spoken in years, and that woman does not get to see our kids. Your wife needs to learn boundaries. What she did was 1,000, not an update. Welp, I don't even know where to begin. I posted just over a week ago. I'm still gathering my thoughts. So, here goes. After reading all of the comments, I went and spoke to Audrey, my wife. She knew I was furious still and quickly opened the floor by apologizing and saying many of the things you had all said here. She even referenced comments by a half-town cuck, which took me by surprise. She said she saw the thread. She was Googling relationship advice and came across relationships and saw this thread and realized I had written it. Luckily, I used a throwaway account, eh? We talked, she cried. I ate. I felt vindicated but was annoyed that I didn't get to have my dramatic moment. From what she told me, she has an aunt that her mother won't speak to and she didn't want it getting to that level. And that is why she cried, and she felt bad for everything, including meeting to my sisters without my knowledge consent. It goes like this for a while, and as in I've met them before, not just at our house. I ask her to clarify, and she admits that she's met my sisters save for Lisa, and I'll be getting to that before. My wife's school is adjacent to where my sister works. I didn't know this. And they had met for coffee lunch on a few occasions, with my middle sister coming to meet with them at least once. Son of a bitch. By this point, I'm again furious. My oldest sister had bumped into my wife, and they struck up a conversation. The thing is, my mother provided pictures to my sisters, so she knew exactly who she was. By bumped into, my sister simply found my wife and introduced herself. I felt had. I again escaped to my man cave, which is basically a room in the basement where I occasionally smoke cigars and drink with my friends. After I cooled down, I went to talk to Audrey. She had made me steak and ordered Chinese food, which was a cheap attempt to try and calm the situation. Unfortunately, it worked. We talked. After telling her that another omission and I was going to seriously question our marriage, I get the entire story and buckle in for this one, people. Lisa, my ne'er-do-well, abusive sister, has basically ruined the lives of everyone in my family. She accused the husband of my middle sister of being a sexual pervert and admitted to a very fake affair. She then rocked my oldest sister's world by apparently front-kicking my youngest nephew as probably 3. Apparently my nephew was sitting and signing loudly at the TV. So she front-kicked him. A front kick was Lisa's favorite weapon, which I remember all too well. My sister's husband apparently tackled her and my mother called the police. She was taken for a psych hold, and in lieu of criminal charges, she was admitted for a stay in a regional psychiatric facility and is barred from contact with my family for the time being. I'll get to that, too. She was diagnosed with a slew of mental disorders. No shit. My parents know I have a zero-tolerance policy for Lisa-related news, which is why it never filtered back to me. So, needless to say, my sister is mentally ill, and now the entire family knows. What infuriated me was that Audrey knew this incident and wanted me to make amends. The chance that my kid gets within 100 meters of Lisa is nil. I basically told Audrey to drop the Lisa issue. It was a non-starter. She's too sick, and I am not too sure she's not putting people on. She's that cunning and too dangerous, and I am not going to put myself in any position to deal with her. Audrey accepted that. My oldest sister had to face a bunch of demons, and now realizes that to protect her husband and children, they can't be around Lisa, especially unsupervised. And Lisa can only be at events where there are a lot of potential witnesses. Lisa is not welcome at their home or my parents' home, and to interact with her, it has to be in a public place, cannot go near the children. Her husband, my middle sister, nearly wound up divorced. Her husband consistently claimed his innocence, But Lisa could spin a phenomenal story that was so convincing that people began to believe she was having an affair. My sister and her husband went through hell. But it turns out details are not Lisa's strength, and she wound up making claims that couldn't be backed up, and that's when it all fell apart. So, my sister's husbands have banned Lisa from their houses and from seeing their kids. Lisa is now living in an apartment by herself and in routine therapy. Well, I guess after all of these events went down, it became apparent that not only was I not crazy, but my reaction to it had been at least partly justified. My sisters decided that they wanted to make amends, but I had been really uninterested. That's when they picked on the weakest duckling, my wife. My mother didn't think it was a great idea and thought that if there was going to be a meeting, my mother should put it out there and just let it be. I honestly would have chosen that route, but no. Audrey, doing her best to infuriate and annoy me, asked that I meet my sisters. It would be me, my 2 sisters, and no one else. I could set the time and place. I agreed on the condition that Audrey not attend and that there be 0 expectations. I chose to meet them at a local pub, which I got to about an hour early. All week, I had been dreading this. We decided to meet on Saturday afternoon. I got there early, and I was already 2 pints in when they arrived. We sat and had a few moments of stilted conversation. I realized that their husbands had come and were sitting at a different table, so I simply invited them over. My sisters had brought pictures of their family, and they talked about what they were up to and how they were proud of me for becoming a lawyer. Just as I was about to have my dramatic moment, the wind was knocked out of my sails again. My middle sister jumped straight into it and apologies profusely, as does my oldest sister and her husband, who grabs my hand and tells me how sorry he is. Like, hey, seriously? I was infuriated that I was going to have my big dramatic moment only to have the proverbial chair kicked out from under me. This caused me to drink more. There must have been over an hour of them telling me what a scumbag my sister is, how they are sorry, how they realize they damaged my childhood, etc. Well, afternoon turns to evening. I recommend that we take a photo to send to my parents. They haven't seen their kids together in years. Well, when drunk, a cycled crazy doesn't apparently think things through. My parents are thrilled and share the photos with my wife. Audrey begins to call my phone. I'm still pissed off with her and leaves me teary, maudlin messages. Then the idea bounces around that my sisters will host a combined birthday party family get-together early next month. Being drunk, I agree. This gets around to my parents and wife, who can't believe how well this turned out. I'm not thrilled. I drank a little too much. And I'm not thrilled. I agreed to some family gathering in October, but I could see how much it meant to my parents. And I realized that holding on to so much anger really made me feel better but was hurting them, and I don't want to be vindictive, so I can tolerate getting to know them all again at set family events. So before we went out separate ways, I gotta ask a question. Why didn't they believe me? Basically, it boiled down to the fact that Lisa could lie like she breathes and could easily build a narrative where it wasn't clear who was being forthright, and I often took the blame. I told them how I still have trust issues and how Lisa's abuse impacts my personal life. This caused them to get teary and apologize, which, sadly, didn't make me as happy as I dreamed it would. My wife has been really happy, and my mother called and admitted that she knows this is just a first step, and it's not an easy process, but having her family get back together is something that weighed heavily on her. So, I guess I made everyone happy. I'm not thrilled. Getting the answers I wanted didn't feel as good as I thought it would be. But I guess there is a weight lifted and the feeling that people know I wasn't crazy. Lie or wrong makes me feel better. I'm a single father. I have raised my son alone because when he was just a few days old, his mother suddenly decided she doesn't want a child anymore. She claimed she's not ready to have a child and refused to even feed him or hold him. I wanted to give her some time. I thought that maybe it's just postpartum depression or something. I was ready to be there for her, but she was serious. She packed her stuff and left the hospital. Her last words were that she wants to see neither me or our son ever again. I have never seen her since, and I kind of feel like mother-in-law called had something to do with it, because during her pregnancy she was talking all the time about how young her daughter is, and how appropriate of a moment this is for her to have a child. I don't have any proof, and I can't tell anything for sure, but I feel like mother-in-law called somehow secretly persuaded her to take this step for whatever reason. So I was left alone with an infant in my hands. It definitely wasn't easy. I was just 21 years old. I had to leave college and work very hard to give my son everything he needed. Fortunately, I wasn't completely alone. There were people who helped me to get through the hardest period. People who babysat him while I was working, who gave me advice on how to take care of a baby, and I'll be forever thankful to them. When he grew up a little, it became easier. I could send him to a kindergarten and work without asking people to take care of him while I'm not there. During all this time, I hope to hear from his mother. I hope that she'll eventually come around and realize you can't just leave your child like a worthless piece of trash. But even though I had left her my contacts, and she could call me or write me a letter or something, she didn't. I never heard from her. She never once used her rights to visit him. When he was little, he often asked me why did his mother leave him? Why didn't she want him? And I didn't know what to answer because I always tried not to speak badly of his mother in front of him. Now my son is 25 years old. He's a hardworking, educated young man, and I'm so proud of him, and I'm proud of myself that I was able to raise him to be a good person. We stopped talking about his mother a long time ago. It was his initiative. He was like, well, if she doesn't want to be with us, then it's her loss and there's nothing we can do about it. So recently, mother-in-law called appeared on our doorstep. Without a call, without any kind of notification, she was just there, and she had come to visit her grandson. I couldn't believe my ears, and at first, I almost didn't recognize her, because so many years are past after all, and she was behaving as if she was a caring grandmother who had come to see her grandchild like she does all the time. Not like she was gone for 25 years. When my son saw her, he didn't recognize her either. I have shown him pictures of his mother and his grandmother just in case they show up one day, but I never really thought that they would. She ran up to him and hugged him just like a loving grandmother would, asking how he's doing and how big and beautiful he has become. And he pushed her away and looked kind of confused. I told him that it's his grandmother who has randomly shown up to visit him, and he was like, oh, and walked away from her. My mother-in-law called didn't take this reaction very well. She looked at me and was like, what have you taught him if he doesn't even say hello to his grandmother? He's looking at me as if I'm a stranger. Haven't you told him about his mother and me or shown him our pictures? Well, technically, you are a stranger, mother-in-law called W. I've never seen you in person. So why are you so surprised? You show up out of thin air after 25 years when he's all grown up and expect him to treat you with love. Isn't it kind of delusional? My son said, Dad did show me your picture, but I needed no picture. I needed you to be there for me. He was quite hateful with her, throwing question after question at her, and mother-in-law called responses were so incredibly narrow-minded. It looked like she wasn't expecting him to ask any questions. He asked her where his mother was, and mother-in-law called, was like, "Oh, she's doing very well. She's living together with a great man, and she has 2 nice kids. She has gotten over that misunderstanding about your birth." She was acting as if her daughter was the victim here, as if we were the ones who left her. He asked her, why did his mother abandon him? Mother-in-law called, said, well, she was such a young girl. It would be craziness for her to have a child at that age. She had her whole life ahead of her, and a baby would only be an obstacle. You must understand it. She didn't want to lose her freedom. Honestly, her daughter was older than me when our son was born. She was 24. I don't think it's too early to have a child. It's not like she was 14 or something. Actually, age has nothing to do with it. I could have given up my son too. I was very young as well. But I didn't because I loved him and I wanted to be his father. At this point, I wanted to show mother-in-law called the door. Obviously, she wasn't welcome in our house. But my son stopped me. He had one more question. He asked why mother-in-law called didn't want to be his grandmother. His mother left him. Fine, but why did mother-in-law called leave him too? Mother-in-law called said, well, I had no time to take care of you. I was a young woman too. I had my life too. And grandkids are only obligated to take care of grandparents when they're old, and that's why I'm here. Then my son told her to leave and never come back. He said he doesn't want to see her ever again, and he won't help her with anything. And as she was leaving, she attacked me like that's what I thought. A man alone cannot raise a proper human being. Such a rude and impolite boy. He would have turned out better in an orphanage than with you. So according to mother-in-law called E, the conclusion is mechi. Don't have children while you're young, or if you do, feel free to leave them and then come back a few decades later, and they'll love you even though they have never received any kind of care from you. But seriously, what the hell was she expecting? Top comments. I'm actually glad this happened. You kicked ass as a father and raised someone who sounds like a strong young man. This strong young man just got to see the difference between the father who raised him and the grandmother and mother who abandoned him for utterly ridiculous reasons. This smells a lot like Granny was trying to butter up her grandson for some reason, either free room and board or money. From the sound of things, she wasn't expecting your son's reaction. Story 2. A 23 female found out my mom's 45. Family history was a complete lie, ended up uncovering the truth behind a 70-year-old conspiracy, and now she won't speak to me and says I've destroyed our family's name. 3 hours ago, my mom decided to do an ancestry DNA test for my grandma to see if she had siblings from her father's side that she could connect with. She never met her dad and didn't know anything about him other than he was a British missionary. Not even his name. He wasn't part of her life or on her birth certificate. And my great-grandmother died before my grandmother had the chance to find out more. My mom shared the Ancestry account info with me, not very tech-savvy, and unfortunately, we didn't find anyone that wasn't a very distant relative. But, come to find out, she wasn't British at all. 50% of her DNA was a mix of West African, which was expected, but the other 50% was based in the Middle East. Levant region specifically. She was, however, 8% European, but it wasn't even British, it was Italian, which surprised us more. The test wasn't the best on the market. Results were very vague and just gave general area rather than specific country. Plus, it didn't have a large user database. Safe to say Mom and I were very confused, but she kinda brushed it off and assumed his family were immigrants to the UK rather than British by blood, which was plausible, I guess. She told my grandmother she was African, Italian, and Persian, and left it at that. I felt like there was more to the story, but we didn't have enough info at the time, so we just moved on. Fast forward to the present, and I did a test from 23andMe. It was a much more comprehensive test than the one Mom did, with better ancestry profile and much larger user database. My results finally got answers on the 11 DNA we had gotten hints of from my grandmother's test. I was 11% Lebanese, a lovely equivalent to a great-grandparent being almost fully Lebanese. And that test also helped me discover a third or fourth cousin that was currently living in Lebanon. I reached out to him and we connected, and I asked if he knew of any connections to my country and his family's recent history. He told me his great-grandfather's brother had moved and settled here with his family in the 1920s. He gave me a bit more info about him, but not much as most, who knew the details were now long dead. I went on the long search from there to find out the truth about my grandmother's story. It took many months, searching through old records, talking to many of the older Lebanese in my community, as well as my own extended family, and finally, I put together the whole story, or as much of it as I was going to get. Turns out my great-grandmother had been born up north in a village not too far from the capital. She'd moved down to find better-paying work, and that's how she ended up a nanny to this wealthy Lebanese family. She worked there for 3 years. At some point, she started an affair with the eldest son, who was already married with 2 kids. She was their nanny. She got pregnant, was given hush money, and then returned to her village. That's when she told her family the story that we knew, of that she met a British missionary who had promised to marry her but went back to his country without telling her and only left her a little money for the baby. The family took her back in, and they even named my grandmother after a former British queen. But my great-grandmother ended up passing away when my grandmother was only 9. It was then that she was sent to city to her aunt that had married and settled down there. There she eventually met my grandfather, and they had a whopping 11 kids, my mom being the second youngest. No one in the family knew of my great-grandmother's secret, except the aunt that my grandmother happened to be sent to. She only knew the truth because her sister had confided in her on a particularly rough night when my grandmother was a baby, and then they never really spoke of it again. I eventually spoke to my great-great-aunt, and with all the evidence I had gathered, she decided it was finally time to tell her sister's story. When I put together everything I had gathered, I went to my grandmother. I told her the truth about everything, showed her pics of her dad and even her half-siblings who I had tried to reach out to, but they had wanted nothing to do with their father's affair baby. We both cried and talked for hours, and she just kept thanking me. Her father had died a year before I started searching, and I wished I had looked earlier when my mom first did that test, because maybe my grandmother could have met him then. I have a lot of guilt and regret about that, but there's nothing I can do but accept it. I went to Grandma first, but then told Mom everything after, and she went into full-on denial mode. Despite all the evidence, she refused to believe it, and even tried to convince Grandma that they were lies too, but she refused to listen to her. She found out I had talked to many people while gathering info, and that made her even more furious. She claims I ran our family name through the mud and put out family business on the streets that I had no right to. It's been weeks, and she's barely spoken to me since I told her. I've tried to apologize and explain, but nothing works. I don't know what to do. She thinks I should have left it all alone, but I think Grandma deserved truth. And I don't regret it, but maybe I'm in the wrong. Maybe I should have just left well enough alone. Context. There's a fairly significant Lebanese population in my country that has been here for a few generations following conflicts in their region. They're generally lovely people, but some are quite condescending to the native population and can be ignorant racist. Mom has had some pretty bad experiences with a couple of them. And though she's also good friends with quite a few Lebanese people in our community, she has a lot of reservations with them and wouldn't want to be actually related to them. Which is why I think she kinda ignored that part passability at the time of the first test and hates the idea now. Genuinely thanks to everyone for all the supportive comments and suggestions. It definitely helps, and I'll be getting to responding to them all today. But they're also making me question some things regarding the nature of my great-grandmother's relationship with her boss. And I'm actually visiting my grandma today for the first time in a little while, and my great-aunt lives with her too. So hopefully I'll get to talk to her a bit and get some more clarification and answers on that as well, to talk to my grandma about her reaching out to my mom and seeing if she can broker some peace between us herself. Also, thanks for dropping your own DNA stories. They're so fascinating and I'm enjoying reading them. Drop comments. Your mother's shooting the messenger. She was okay investigating until you got results that rocked her sense of identity. So now she's lashing out at you for finding those results. It's not rational. And you did nothing wrong. I would suggest giving her time and space to work through her feelings without using you for target practice. You did right by your grandmother and great-grandmother. It sounds like your grandmother was happy to have it, and you had the blessing of the person best situated to speak on your great-grandmother's behalf. This kind of stuff goes with the territory of getting a DNA test. 23andMe even warns people that it could bring up things that they might find hard to accept. You aren't wrong for investigating your heritage and looking for the truth. Your mom is upset, but that doesn't mean you did anything wrong. Hopefully, over time, she will get over it.
The gentle morning sunlight streams through the window, softly illuminating my face. As usual, I wake up before the alarm clock rings. Even at 62, the habit from my 30 years as a high school teacher is hard to shake off. Good morning, Eleanor. My husband George greets me with a sleepy voice from beside me. At 65, he still maintains his early rising habit from his days as a police officer, even after retirement. Good morning, George. Another beautiful day, I smile in response as I get up from bed. I open the curtains and take in the morning view of Cedarville, Ohio. It's a small college town of about 4,000 people, but it exudes a peaceful atmosphere with its lush greenery. As I prepare breakfast, I mentally organize today's schedule. Our son Mike and daughter-in-law Sarah are heading off to work, so we'll be looking after our 2-year-old grandson, Jacob. Mike is busy as a researcher at a major pharmaceutical company, while Sarah works at a local real estate agency. Helping the young couple balance work and childcare is one of the joys of being grandparents. George, don't forget we're watching Jacob today, I remind him. Oh, of course. I'm looking forward to it. George looks up from his newspaper with a smile. Taking care of our grandson has become one of our greatest pleasures in life. After breakfast, I take a walk around the neighborhood.
I exchange greetings with neighbors along the way. Good morning, Eleanor. Early as always, I see, Mrs. Johnson calls out while tending to her garden. Good morning, Linda. Your garden looks lovely, I reply. Thank you. I'm planning to sell some of these flowers at the church bazaar, she says. It's moments like these that remind me of the strong sense of community here. We've lived in Cedarville for over 40 years, and this warm community has become our cherished home. When I return home, I receive a call from Sarah. Good morning, Mom. We'll be dropping off Jacob soon, she says. Of course, Sarah. Don't worry about a thing, I assure her. As I hang up, I feel a slight twinge of mixed emotions. My relationship with Sarah isn't bad, but sometimes I sense differences in our values. We occasionally disagree on small things like child-rearing methods or household role division. However, for the sake of family harmony, I always try my best to be understanding. Just before noon, Mike brings Jacob over. Mom, thanks again for today. We'll pick him up in the evening, he says. All right, Mike. Take care, I reply. As I embrace Jacob, I feel warmth spread through my heart at my young grandson's innocent smile. Grandma. Jacob laughs gleefully, throwing his arms around my neck. In the afternoon, while playing with Jacob in the garden, some neighborhood children join us. The sound of children's laughter fills the air, creating a peaceful atmosphere. Eleanor, how about some tea? George calls from the porch. Thank you, George, I reply gratefully. We sit on the porch, watching our grandson and the neighborhood children play, enjoying a tranquil moment together. Our retirement life is filled with these small moments of happiness. In the evening, when Mike comes to pick up Jacob, he looks a bit tired. What's wrong, Mike? Is something bothering you? I ask, concerned. Oh, it's nothing, Mom. Just busy at work. He trails off. I'm a bit worried about my son's demeanor, but I decide not to press further. The young couple must have their own concerns. As I lie in bed that night, I reflect on the day. Even in our peaceful daily life, I sense small worries and changes affecting each family member. I wonder what tomorrow will bring as I quietly close my eyes. After finishing my morning routine, I was waiting in the living room for Jacob to arrive. Mike's tired appearance yesterday was still on my mind, and I thought I'd try to have a more detailed conversation with him today. Outside the window, the soft early summer sunlight gently illuminated the streets of Cedarville. Suddenly, the doorbell rang. Looking at the clock, I realized it was too early for Mike to arrive. I wonder who that could be, I thought as I headed towards the door. When I opened the door, 2 police officers were standing there. One was a man in his 50s, and the other was a younger woman in her 30s. They were both in uniform, but something felt off. Good morning, Mrs. Thompson. We're here to discuss a matter with you, the older officer said. Yes, what can I help you with? I asked, feeling a bit tense. Can we talk inside? The young female officer asked. There was a hint of urgency in her voice that I found unsettling. I led them into the living room. As I gestured for them to sit on the sofa, they settled down with a somewhat uneasy air. "We're here on a rather delicate matter," the older officer began. His expression was grave. "What's happened?" I asked, feeling anxious. "An arrest warrant has been issued for your grandson, Jacob Thompson." The moment I heard those words, my mind went blank. "What? What did you say?" My voice rose involuntarily. Surely there must be some mistake. "Jacob is only 2 years old," I said, desperately trying to make sense of the situation. The older officer cleared his throat and said, "We understand that this is an unusual situation. However, we have our orders." Confusion and questions were swirling in my mind. An arrest warrant for a 2-year-old child. How could that be possible? Even when George was in the police force, I'd never heard of anything like this. What exactly is he being charged with? I asked, trying to maintain my composure. The young female officer answered, "We can't disclose the details, but we have information suggesting involvement in a serious economic crime." Hearing those words, I became even more bewildered. A 2-year-old child involved in an economic crime. It made absolutely no sense. This must be a mistake. Jacob is truly just a 2-year-old child. He can't even count money by himself, let alone commit an economic crime, I explained desperately. The two officers exchanged glances. I sensed something akin to nervousness in their demeanor. "Mrs. Thompson, we understand the unusual nature of this situation. However, we have orders from above." The older officer began, but the younger one interjected. "Actually, there is a way to resolve this situation," she said. I listened intently. "If you pay bail, we won't need to take Jacob into custody," the young officer explained. "Bail? How much?" I asked, trying to maintain my composure despite my agitation. $100,000. I gasped when I heard the amount. $100,000. Such a large sum, I couldn't possibly. "We can arrange for installments. $30,000 now, and the rest can be paid later," the older officer quickly added. The feeling that something was very wrong grew stronger within me. Police procedures couldn't possibly be this simple. And the behavior of these two officers was strange. Could I have some time to think about this? "I'd like to consult with my husband," I said, trying to buy some time. The two officers visibly tensed. "But this is an urgent matter." "I understand. But we're talking about a large sum of money." "I need a little time," I said firmly. The officers reluctantly stood up. "All right, we'll return in 2 hours. Please make your decision by then." As I saw them off, various questions were swirling in my mind. Was this really an official procedure? Why would there be an arrest warrant for a 2-year-old child? And were these two really police officers? After closing the door, I took a deep breath. I needed to think calmly. First, I should call George. He would know about police procedures. And I needed to contact Mike and Sarah too. As I reached for the phone, I felt a sense of unease along with a premonition that something big was about to happen. I let out a deep sigh as I hung up the phone. My conversation with George had made the abnormality of this situation even clearer. "Eleanor, listen carefully." George's voice had maintained its usual calm. "First of all, it's almost impossible for an arrest warrant to be issued for a 2-year-old child. Also, the police would never directly demand bail money. This is most likely a scam." Recalling George's words, I started jotting down notes. I listed the suspicious points about the two individuals posing as police officers, the slight oddity in their uniforms, their nervous behavior, their demand for immediate bail payment. As I wrote each point down, it became increasingly clear how many suspicious elements there were. Looking out the window, I saw Mrs. Johnson working in her garden. She might have noticed something. I went out to the garden and called out to her over the fence. "Linda, do you have a moment?" "What is it, Eleanor? Is something worrying you?" Mrs. Johnson approached, taking off her soil-covered gloves. I briefly explained the situation. Mrs. Johnson's expression changed to one of surprise and concern. "Oh my, what a terrible thing." She frowned. "Come to think of it, I did see an unfamiliar car parked earlier. It looked like a police car, but something seemed off about it." My heart raced at this information. "What kind of car was it?" Mrs. Johnson provided me with details. The make, color, even part of the license plate number. I hurriedly wrote it all down. "Thank you, Linda. This is very helpful." Back in the house, I tried calling Mike. But there was no answer. I left several messages on his voicemail, but received no response. Anxiety spread through my chest. Next, I tried calling Sarah, and she answered immediately. "What is it, Mom?" There was an odd uneasiness in Sarah's voice. "Sarah, something serious has happened. It's about Jacob." As I began to explain the situation, Sarah's reaction was strange. Rather than surprise or concern, I sensed something more like panic. "I see. But Mom, shouldn't you just do what the police say?" I felt uneasy about those words. The normal Sarah would have been much more agitated. "Sarah, do you know something about this?" "No. Nothing." Her voice was trembling. "Sorry, Mom. I'm at work right now. I'll call you back later." The call ended. Various questions swirled in my head. Sarah's behavior was clearly unusual. Was she hiding something? Looking at the clock, I realized it was almost time for the fake officers to return. I hurriedly began my preparations. I went over the response methods George had taught me and prepared to gather evidence. I slipped a small voice recorder into my pocket and made sure my phone camera was ready. The doorbell rang. I took a deep breath and headed for the door. In my mind, I organized all the information I had gathered. The suspicious points about the fake officers, Mrs. Johnson's testimony, Sarah's strange reaction. Before opening the door, I steeled my resolve. I had to unravel this mystery and protect my family. For the sake of my grandson Jacob, and for the truth. As I placed my hand on the doorknob, I whispered quietly, "Now, let's reveal the truth." When I opened the door, the two fake officers were standing there as expected. "Mrs. Thompson, have you made your decision?" the older man asked, unable to hide his impatience. Maintaining a facade of calm, I replied, "Yes, I've thought it over. But could you please show me the official warrant?" The two visibly flustered, exchanging glances. "Well, that's..." the younger woman stammered. "And I'd like to see your police badges as well," I said firmly. "We apologize, but we didn't bring them today." "I see. In that case, let me call the station to confirm," I said, reaching for my smartphone. The two panicked. No, that won't be necessary," the older man hurriedly tried to stop me. We'll be leaving now." With that, they hastily departed. I watched their retreating figures with a cold gaze. As I closed the door, I felt my heart racing. This gave me near certainty. But I still didn't have the full picture. That night, I received a call from Mike. "Mom, what's going on? I had a bunch of missed calls from you." I explained the situation. Mike's voice trembled with surprise and anger. "What in the world?" "I'm coming home right away, Mom." After hanging up, I was pondering if I had overlooked anything. That's when I noticed Sarah's smartphone on the living room table. She must have forgotten it in her haste to leave earlier. I hesitated. It's not right to invade someone's privacy. But now, our family's safety was at stake. Taking a deep breath, I picked up the smartphone. When I swiped the screen, it wasn't locked. Looking at the recent call history, I noticed frequent interactions with an unknown number. I pressed one of them, and a voicemail played. "Sarah, proceed as planned. I'll wipe out your debt. This is your chance to outsmart your husband and in-laws." I trembled at the man's voice. Was this the beginning of it all? But why would Sarah do such a thing? I heard the front door open. Mike had returned. "Mom, I'm home." Mike's voice was a mix of exhaustion and worry. After I explained the situation in detail, Mike's expression clouded. "Sarah, what on earth are you thinking?" Just then, the doorbell rang. When we opened it, Mr. Wilson from across the street was standing there. "Eleanor, I'm sorry for coming at this hour. But I think you should see this." What he handed over was footage from a security camera. It showed the fake officers in a secret meeting with Sarah. I thought this looked strange, so I checked it out. Don't you think this is odd? We were speechless. The evidence was clear. At that moment, the front door opened, and Sarah walked in. Her expression froze. "Sarah, can you explain this?" Mike's voice was low, controlled. Sarah collapsed to the floor. "I'm sorry. I'll tell you everything." Her confession began. She revealed her gambling addiction and the massive debt she had accumulated. She spoke of her struggling marriage and her jealousy over Mike's dependence on his parents. Finally, she admitted to being coerced into this scheme by debt collectors who were threatening her. But I didn't really want to do it. Deceiving my family. Sarah's voice trembled. Mike let out a deep sigh. Why didn't you talk to me? We could have solved this together. I watched the two of them with mixed emotions. Anger and sadness, but also a bit of relief. At least now, the truth was out in the open. Well, let's report this to the police, I said quietly. The real police, this time. With those words, the atmosphere in the room seemed to lighten a bit. A long night was coming to an end. Difficult times lay ahead, no doubt. But now that we knew the truth, we could surely overcome this trial as a family. Looking out the window, I could see the first light of dawn peeking through. It was the start of a new day. And the beginning of a new chapter for our family. As the morning sun began to softly illuminate the room, we heard the sound of police sirens approaching. The real police had arrived. We went out to the front door to greet them. Thompson family, we apologize for the delay, Detective Johnson, a veteran officer, addressed us. Please tell us the details of what happened. We took turns explaining the events of the past few days. Sarah's confession, Mr. Wilson's security camera footage, and the actions of the fake police officers. Detective Johnson listened intently with a serious expression. I see, I understand the situation now, the detective nodded. Actually, we've been seeing an increase in these types of scams recently. The perpetrators try to exploit family bonds to fraudulently obtain money. In this case, they targeted a 2-year-old child. Hearing those words, we once again realized the gravity of the situation. The unrealistic scenario of an arrest warrant for 2-year-old Jacob was a trap designed to cloud our judgment. Sarah, the detective gently addressed her. Your cooperation will be key to solving this case. Can you help us catch the culprits? Sarah nodded through her tears. Yes, I'll do anything. I don't want to lie anymore. A few hours later, the fake police officers were arrested. They were part of an organized fraud group that used tactics to extort money by exploiting family vulnerabilities. They had used Jacob's name simply because he was the youngest family member. The sheer absurdity of it had the effect of confusing the victim's judgment. Once the immediate crisis had passed, we took time as a family to face each other. We gathered in the living room, sipping tea and discussing things we hadn't been able to talk about before. Sarah, why didn't you come to us sooner? Mike asked quietly. Sarah answered with her head bowed, I was ashamed. Your parents are so wonderful, and I felt like I was a failure as a wife. So I escaped into gambling. I took Sarah's hand. You're not a failure as a wife, dear. Everyone has their own struggles. What's important is that we overcome them together. Mike nodded in agreement. That's right, Sarah. You don't have to bear this burden alone. From now on, let's talk about everything. Sarah's eyes welled up with tears at those words. I'm so sorry. Thank you. We spent a long time talking. About our feelings, our future life, and about Jacob. Slowly but surely, I could feel our family bonds being repaired. A few days later, our neighbors gathered to throw us a small party. "Eleanor, you've been through quite an ordeal," Mrs. Johnson said gently. "We made it through thanks to everyone's help," I replied, filled with gratitude. Mr. Wilson approached us too. "I'm glad that footage was useful. If you ever need anything, just let me know." I felt a warmth in my chest, touched by the kindness of our community. In the middle of the party, Jacob came running to me. "Grandma." As I picked him up, I found myself tearing up. We had all come together as a family to protect this child. That night, I stepped out into the garden alone to look at the stars. The events of the past few days flashed through my mind like a slideshow. Fear, anxiety, anger, and finally, the relief and hope that followed. I've never felt the importance of family so strongly before. There's no such thing as a perfect family. But by understanding and supporting each other, we can overcome any difficulty. That's the true strength of family. This ordeal taught me that. From inside the house, I could hear the laughter of Mike, Sarah, and Jacob. I took a deep breath and looked up at the starry sky once more. "Thank you," I whispered softly. I'm not sure who I was thanking, but a definite feeling of gratitude spread through my chest. Tomorrow, a new day begins again. I'm sure it won't all be smooth sailing. But I know we can get through it together. As a family, and as members of this warm community. I quietly returned to the house. It I, Barbara Walters, woke up in my Manhattan apartment as the morning sun streamed in. Even at 62, the habits from my days as an ABC News anchor haven't quite left me. As I brew my morning coffee, I gaze out the window at the greenery of Central Park. It's been 2 years since I retired, but I still find myself checking the news every morning. It's Taylor's day today, I smile to myself. It's my scheduled day with Taylor, my 4-year-old angelic granddaughter. I'm looking after her while my son Tom and his wife Rita are busy with work. Sitting at the dining table, nibbling on toast, I reflect on Tom and Rita's recent family situation. Tom is 35, working at an advertising agency in New York City. He's passionate about his work, always searching for new ideas. Rita, 33, teaches at an elementary school in Brooklyn. They both lead busy lives, but lately, I've noticed they seem somewhat tired. And then there's Taylor. Thinking about her makes my heart clench. Taylor has a mild developmental disability, with speech delays and social issues. She was diagnosed a year ago. Since then, Tom and Rita have been desperately searching for special support and therapy programs. Oh, I wish I could do anything for that child, I sighed deeply. The problem is the cost of support. Much of it isn't covered by insurance, and Tom and Rita are struggling financially. With the recession in the advertising industry, Tom's salary hasn't increased, and Rita's teacher's salary isn't enough. I know they're doing their best to manage, but the truth is, their debts are growing. I've offered financial assistance several times, but Tom has refused. We'll manage on our own, Mom. Don't worry, he says, and it breaks my heart every time. Tom always tries to put on a brave face for me. It must be his father's pride. I want to do something for Taylor. But I don't know how. Is there a way to help without hurting Tom and Rita's pride? This dilemma weighs on my mind daily. Looking at the clock, I realize it's almost time for Taylor to arrive. I hurry to get ready and start tidying the living room. I set out Taylor's favorite toys and prepare games to aid her development. The doorbell rings, and when I open it, Taylor jumps in with a beaming smile. "Grandma," she exclaims. Seeing that innocent smile makes all my worries disappear. "Welcome, my angel," I say, embracing Taylor. Grateful for the day ahead with her, I make a silent vow. I'll make sure you and your parents are happy. Somehow, I'll find a way. Reassuring myself, I take Taylor's hand and announce the start of our fun day together. 2 weeks after that enjoyable time with Taylor, our family decided to have a barbecue in a park near Lake George on a Sunday. Tom had suggested, "Let's spend some quality family time together." There was an unusual brightness in his voice. He must want to relieve some of the recent tension. We left Manhattan early in the morning. In the car, Taylor was humming excitedly. Seeing her like this, I felt relieved inside. She's usually a woman of few words, but today she seems to be looking forward to it. "Hey, Taylor. I wonder what kind of fish we'll see today?" Rita gently asks. "Fish. Big ones," Taylor replies. At that moment, the car was filled with a warm atmosphere. After about a 3-hour drive, we arrived at our destination. The clear surface of Lake George spread out before us, with the surrounding trees swaying in the wind. The air was crisp, a completely different world from Manhattan. "Taylor can play freely here," I said aloud without thinking. Tom answered while unloading the luggage from the car. "Yes, that's right. It's been a while since I've done something for the family. I hope Taylor enjoys it too." I felt a bit uneasy about his words. Family time. It sounds almost like a duty. But I suppressed that feeling and responded with a smile. "Yes, it's going to be a fun day." As we started preparing for the barbecue, each family member took on a role. Tom was in charge of starting the fire, Rita was setting the table. I started preparing the ingredients. Taylor was picking flowers on the nearby grass. At first glance, it looked like an ideal family holiday. However, upon closer observation, I could sense an underlying tension. Tom's movements were awkward, and Rita's smile seemed a bit forced. There seemed to be more distance between them than usual. "Hey, how should we cook the meat today?" I asked. Tom answered a bit irritably, "It doesn't matter, Mom. Just leave it to me." I flinched for a moment at his attitude. But I didn't want to cause any problems here. Today is a day for family togetherness. As the preparations were in full swing, I was completely absorbed in cooking. While grilling vegetables on skewers, I suddenly realized something. Taylor was nowhere to be seen. "Where's Taylor?" I asked. Rita answered, "She was playing over there just a moment ago." "Tom, did you see her?" Tom shook his head. "No, I was watching the fire." Suddenly, anxiety crossed my mind. We had all been so focused on our tasks that we had taken our eyes off Taylor. "Taylor!" I called out loudly. There was no response. Tom and Rita finally seemed to realize the seriousness of the situation. The three of us started searching the area separately. "Over here." We heard Rita's scream-like voice. We ran towards the lake. What we saw was Taylor's small body floating on the surface of the water. "Taylor!" Tom shouted, stripping off his clothes and jumping into the lake. Rita and I could only watch anxiously from the shore. Seconds later, Tom returned to the shore carrying Taylor. Taylor was unconscious, her face pale. "She's not breathing," Rita cried out. I tried desperately to stay calm. "Call 911. I told Rita, and I began performing CPR on Taylor. "Please, Taylor. Wake up," I called out prayerfully. Tom stood there in a daze. Fear and self-blame were visible in his eyes. When we heard the ambulance siren, Taylor coughed faintly. A glimmer of hope. But we were far from being able to relax. While the paramedics were loading Taylor onto a stretcher, all we could do was watch. Suddenly, Tom shouted, "Mom! Why did you take your eyes off her?" I caught my breath at those words. Should I be blamed? Or? Amidst the swirling confusion, regret, and anxiety, the ambulance drove away with Taylor. We were left standing there, unable to say a word. The scenery of Lake George, which should have been beautiful, now felt terrifyingly cold. As the sound of the ambulance siren faded into the distance, we were still standing by the lakeside. It was as if time had stopped. Even after the ambulance carrying Taylor disappeared from view, my eyes remained fixed on the distant road. Why did this happen? Rita's trembling voice broke the silence. She collapsed to her knees and began to sob. Tom was still standing there in his wet clothes, looking dazed. His eyes still held the color of fear and confusion. I took a deep breath. Someone had to stay calm. "Rita, it's okay. Taylor is a strong girl," I said gently. "Let's think about going to the hospital now." Rita looked up at me. A faint light of hope shone in her tear-filled eyes. "Yes, that's right," she answered in a shaky voice. "We need to go to Taylor." Tom seemed to have finally come to his senses. I'll get the car ready," he muttered. Then he quickly headed towards the parking lot. I helped Rita stand up and gently put my arm around her shoulder. "It's going to be all right. Let's get through this together." However, contrary to those words, anxiety was swirling inside me. Is Taylor safe? Will there be any lasting effects? And why didn't anyone notice? When Tom brought the car around, we hurriedly got in. The car was enveloped in a heavy silence. "Which hospital?" Tom asked from the driver's seat. "Glens Falls Hospital," I answered. "That's what the paramedics said." As the car started moving and we headed towards the hospital, Rita kept checking her mobile phone repeatedly. "Why hasn't the hospital contacted us?" she muttered anxiously. "They're probably still running tests," I tried to reassure her. "If there's good news, they'll contact us right away." However, those words rang hollow. The tension in the car increased with time. Suddenly, Tom gripped the steering wheel tightly and shouted, "Damn it! Why did this happen?" Rita and I jumped at his voice. Tom's anger and self-blame had burst out all at once. "Tom, calm down," I said, trying to reason with him. "Focus on driving safely now." But Tom's anger didn't subside. "Mom, why did you take your eyes off her?" He glared at me in the back seat. "You said you would look after Taylor." I caught my breath at those words. "Tom, I was also preparing the food." "No excuses," Tom yelled. "It's your responsibility because you took your eyes off her." The atmosphere in the car froze. Rita looked at her husband with a surprised expression, and I was at a loss for words. "Tom," Rita said in a small voice. "It's everyone's responsibility. None of us were paying attention to Taylor." However, Tom wouldn't listen. "No, Mom said she would watch her. We're busy with work, but Mom has free time." Those words sent a pain through my heart. "Tom, that's not." Suddenly, the car came to an abrupt stop. We had arrived at the hospital parking lot. Tom got out of the car and turned to Rita. "We'll go alone." "Mom, you go home." "But, Tom." Rita hesitated. "Just do it," Tom shouted. "That's enough. If Mom is there, our position as parents." He swallowed his words, but their meaning was clear. My presence might call into question their qualifications as parents. Rita looked at me apologetically. "Barbara, I'm sorry. But I understand," I answered quietly. "Let me know how Taylor is doing when you find out." Tom and Rita hurried towards the hospital entrance. I was left alone in the car. Watching them disappear into the hospital through the window, I let out a deep sigh. More than anger or sadness, only emptiness remained. And then, I made a decision. For Taylor's sake, I must uncover the truth, I thought to myself. Left alone in the parking lot of Glens Falls Hospital, I was stunned for a while. However, thinking about Taylor, I couldn't just sit still. I got out of the car and headed towards the hospital entrance. When I asked at the reception, I was told that Taylor was in the intensive care unit. I decided to wait in the waiting room to hear the doctor's explanation. After what felt like a long time, the doctor finally appeared. Taylor's condition is stable, the doctor said. Fortunately, the oxygen supply to her brain wasn't cut off for a long time. However, the next 24 hours are crucial. I breathed a sigh of relief at those words. However, my relief was short-lived as a police officer entered the waiting room. "We'd like to ask you about the circumstances of the accident," the officer said. I explained the sequence of events, but I noticed that Tom and Rita were nowhere to be seen. When I asked the officer, he said they had already finished giving their statements and left. That's strange, I thought. Why would they leave in such a hurry when their granddaughter's life was in danger? As I answered the officer's questions, a sense of unease grew within me. Tom and Rita's attitude, and the situation they described, something wasn't right. After the questioning was over, I decided to return to the park. There must be something I had overlooked. When I arrived at the park, traces of the barbecue were still there. I looked around, wondering if there were any witnesses. That's when I noticed a family having a picnic nearby. Gathering my courage, I approached them, and they kindly responded. "Yes, we did see a child fall into the water," the father of the family said. "Actually, we were filming my daughter's birthday. It might be in the background of our video." My heart raced. "Would you mind showing that video to the police?" They readily agreed. I immediately contacted the police, and we arranged to check the video. The police officer's expression changed as he watched the footage. "This is an unexpected development." I was also shown the video. What it showed was Tom leading Taylor close to the river. It wasn't an accident. It was intentional. I was speechless with shock. The police officer seized the video as evidence and said he would conduct further investigation. In a daze, I returned to my home in Manhattan. My mind was in turmoil, and my heart was filled with pain. Why would Tom do such a thing? The next morning, I was awakened by the sound of the doorbell. It was the police. "We found new evidence," the detective said. "We'd like to talk to you about the contents of the video." I led them to the living room and listened to the detective's words with bated breath. "We've analyzed yesterday's video in detail," the detective began. "What we found is that this wasn't just an accident." The detective took out a tablet and played the video. The clearer footage showed Tom leading Taylor by the hand to the river and gently pushing her. Why? I was at a loss for words. Furthermore, when we checked your family's bank records, we found that there have been large debts recently, the detective continued. And Taylor had a high-value life insurance policy. At that moment, all the pieces fell into place. Financial distress, Taylor's medical expenses, and insurance fraud. "I can't believe it," I muttered. Just then, I heard the sound of the door opening. Tom and Rita had returned. I could see their faces turn pale. They froze when they saw the police in the living room. "What happened?" Rita asked in a trembling voice. The detective stood up and said to them, "Mr. Tom, Mrs. Rita. New evidence has been found regarding Taylor's accident." The blood drained from Tom's face. "What do you mean?" The detective showed them the video. While watching the footage, Rita let out a scream, and Tom collapsed into a chair. "Why?" I cried out in tears. "Why did you do this?" Tom covered his face with both hands and began to sob. We had no choice." Rita continued, "We couldn't pay for Taylor's treatment, the debts kept piling up. But to try to kill her," I said, my voice shaking. "We didn't mean to kill her," Tom shouted. "We just needed the insurance money. We only meant to hurt Taylor a little." But I was at a loss for words. I knew about the couple's financial situation, but I never imagined it would come to this. "Why didn't you talk to me?" I said, filled with sadness and anger. Rita answered, crying, "We were ashamed. Our pride got in the way." The detective quietly said, "Both of you will need to come with us to the station." Tom and Rita complied without resistance. As I watched them being taken away, various emotions swirled within me. Anger, sadness, and deep disappointment. Left alone in the room, I stared blankly out the window. The desire to save my family and the anger at their actions conflicted within me. However, one thing was clear. The strong determination that I must protect Taylor. I stood up and began preparing to go to the hospital. The road ahead would be difficult. But for Taylor's sake, and for the future of our family, I must continue to move forward. A few days after Tom and Rita's arrest, I was meeting with a lawyer. The trial of the two, charged with attempted felony and child abuse, was about to begin. "To be honest, Barbara, the situation is dire," the lawyer said. "The evidence is conclusive." I let out a deep sigh. "I understand. But they are Taylor's parents. Isn't there any way to help them?" The lawyer chose his words carefully. "We'll do our best, but prison time is unavoidable. Right now, we should prioritize Taylor." Those words brought me back to reality. Yes, Taylor is the top priority now. The next day, an official from the New York State Child Protective Services (CPS) came to visit. "We'd like to discuss Taylor's future," the CPS official said. "Are you planning to put her in a facility?" I asked anxiously. "Well," the official hesitated a bit. "If care by a blood relative is possible, we believe that would be best." Those words gave me hope. "Would it be possible for me to raise her?" "That's definitely worth considering," the official replied. "However, there will be a rigorous review process." For the next few weeks, I worked tirelessly to gain custody. Home visits, psychological evaluations, financial status checks. I cleared each process one by one. At the same time, Tom and Rita's trial was progressing. They pleaded guilty and asked for leniency. The court considered their financial hardship but also pointed out the severity of the crime. In the end, Tom was sentenced to 7 years in prison and Rita to 5 years. When I heard the verdict, my feelings were complex. Their actions were unforgivable. But they, too, had been suffering. About a month after the trial ended, I received a call from CPS. "Barbara, after our review, we've decided to grant you temporary custody of Taylor," they said. I couldn't help but cry at those words. "Thank you. I'll do my very best to raise Taylor." However, the CPS official added, "But regular supervision and reports will be necessary. And please understand that there may be a reevaluation depending on the situation after her parents are released." I nodded deeply. This wasn't an end, but a new beginning. As I prepared to welcome Taylor, I renewed my determination to provide this child with a safe and loving environment, and to act as a bridge, hoping that one day the whole family could heal and reconnect. It won't be an easy journey. But for Taylor's sake, and for the family's sake, I was prepared to give it my all. Our new life with Taylor began in my Manhattan apartment. The first few weeks were challenging as we adjusted, but gradually a new routine took shape. "Grandma, are we going to the park today?" Taylor asks with a smile at breakfast. "Let's see, we'll go in the afternoon. Remember, we have a doctor's appointment in the morning, okay?" Taylor's face clouds over a bit, but she quickly nods brightly. "Okay, I understand." The regular therapy at the Child Mind Institute was having a remarkable effect on Taylor. Her language skills were improving, and she was gradually developing social skills. I was changing too. I started volunteering at the New York Foundling, supporting children in similar situations. "Barbara, your experience is inspiring many people," a staff member at the facility told me. Indeed, the journey is challenging. But every time I see Taylor smile, I gain strength. And I spend each day hoping that when Tom and Rita return someday, we can start anew as a healed family. A year has passed since then. Squinting at the morning sun streaming through the window, I quietly sip my coffee. Taylor is still asleep. Over this past year, we've overcome many difficulties. My heart ached many times seeing Taylor cry at night or long for her parents. But gradually, she regained her smile, and now she started attending kindergarten. "Grandma, are we going to see Mom and Dad today?" I smiled gently at Taylor's question. "Yes, we are. It's visitation day, isn't it? Monthly visits to the prison." While serving their sentences, Tom and Rita are seriously engaged in counseling and educational programs. Every time I see the regret of the past and new determination in their eyes, my heart fills with complex emotions. They're trying to change, I remind myself. Indeed, the past cannot be changed. But the future is different. Taylor's growth, Tom and Rita's rehabilitation, and my own changes. All of these are shaping a new form of family. Through my volunteer work at the New York Foundling, I've witnessed the rebirth of many families. It should be possible for us too. Grandma, let's go. Taylor's voice brings me back to the present. As I take her small hand, I make a quiet vow. There will surely be more difficulties ahead. But with love and patience, we can surely overcome them. And someday, we will truly become a family, in every sense of the word. Dreaming of that day, we step out into a new day.
My father moved into a rural area in 1980, a few years after I was born, and soon came my sister. They stayed there ever since. We grew up, etc. Dad died in 2012, and Mom died in DC 2018. My sister moved away in 2002 to get married, kids, etc., and doesn't want to be involved in the affairs since I am the eldest son, and she lives 3/4 of the country away. Over the years, the area was developed and is now more of a suburb. Either way, I take possession of the house through the will, affairs of the estate, etc. Basic total control, nothing to worry about. I get a letter in the mail in February that my parents agreed after their death to sell the house through the trust to the Hawaii and the property would be up for sale. I find no such documentation, and my demand to the lawyer, which is a legit licensed lawyer, is going unanswered to provide the written documentation. I've left a few messages with the admin there, but I am not putting any effort into it if they are not going to respond. I'm not one for sentimental value, and I really am not attached to the house, so if they want it, the price is going to be dictated by me, not them. I live a couple towns away, and I have no interest in moving in my house is bigger, or even thinking about keeping it. 1. My dad was getting senile and might have agreed to something. 2. My mom is a pushover and might have agreed to something. 3. If it isn't in writing, does it mean it is useless? 4. What if they do come after for the sale? Should I just ask for top dollar or fight it, making it a non-Hoa house in an ocean of Hawaii property? Update on. Lawyer for the Hoa has been served and received certified mail demanding details. Uspies.com confirms the lawyer received letter on Friday. Gave him 7 days to produce documentation and or evidence or cease and desist any and all communications in the subject. Edit. After receiving my green slip back and leaving multiple voicemails, I finally got a letter in the mail, but it was basically saying it was a verbal agreement. Not gonna fly. Good luck. I am sending a letter today demanding an in-face meeting on the property with the lawyer, HOA members, or I will be asking the Board of Zoning to change it so I can install a wastewater treatment facility. Relevant comments. I scoured the paper my dad left behind. He was detailed in paperwork for the house and paid it off in 1995. After that, all he ever did was pay the town taxes yearly. That was it. If not, I will doze it and turn it into my own private park or something if no one approaches. The house is in terrible disrepair to the point of wanting to put up a lighting rod and attach it to the frame of the house. It never went to probate. With the will and docs my parents had done up, it never got that far. In 2010, I dragged my parents to an attorney and made them go over their existing will, property, etc. Nothing was left to chance. Sold a van, cashed in some old stocks, etc. When my dad died, there was nothing to argue about. Clean paperwork. Oh yeah, checked out the homeowner association attorney, fully legit, have all the contact details, and even looked up the attorney's cases, all low-level non-confrontational issues such as tree lawsuits, easements, etc. Just nothing. So a paper pusher but not getting a response by phone. I'll be sending a letter shortly. There is a lot of back and forth in the comments about what OOP might do to squatters that isn't relevant to the case at hand, but is interesting to read, for the board. Too long. Didn't read? Their lawyer wasn't responding in great detail, and so I sent a notice to the homeowners directly around the property about the possibility of turning my parents' old property into a sewage treatment plant. Miraculously, the homeowner association called the next day. I proposed a meeting and sold it for around what I wanted, which is a lot. So, after receiving a certified letter at the end of April from the HOA's attorney, he basically ignored me about the verbal agreement details. I contacted my corporate attorney, who I've known for nearly 2 decades with, and he's got a CT bar license, so he'll help if I need to. After not hearing from their attorney for over a couple weeks, leaving calls and messages with his admin, I realized that I was not going to get what I wanted, which was literally to talk to the guy and get the HOA's documentation. So one last college try at the end of April, and nothing still. I got shit to do, and all I got now is a slab and some overgrown lawn, which with the coming of spring, and the constant rain is turning into a mud pit. I live 2 towns over, and I don't have time for this. On May 3rd, I sent a notice to the surrounding houses that construction was to begin on a new sewage treatment plant and to contact the Hoa board for more information, knowing it would take us a day or two. Brought the dozer back on a flat bed and planted it in the driveway where you couldn't miss it. 8 a.m. on Tuesday the next week. Got a call from an Hoa representative wanting to argue with me in regards to this new plant and so forth about property rights, ownership, etc. Not going to lie, choice words and yelling ensued, ending with, "If your goddamn lawyer would call me back, we wouldn't be having this discussion. Good luck with the smell." Keep in mind, nothing filed with the town, no real desire to create a sewage treatment plant, but if you want to ignore me, good luck. About 45 minutes later, I get a call on my cell from an attorney. And I swear to God I was talking to a hostage instead of a lawyer. I told him I will see him at my parents' address at 3 p.m. and we'll finish this deal one way or another, and bringing a laptop. Wanted to argue about not officially meeting in an office blah blah, and I hung up. That was on May the 7th. I knew full well why I chose to send the letter on the 3rd, that because on Wednesday coming up the Hoa board has its monthly meeting, so I wanted it on the agenda. For about an hour, calls would come in from the attorney's admin wanting to change it to his offices, wanting to work this out by mail, etc. Nope, 3 p.m. on site. Called my attorney, he luckily was out of court by 11 and would come down. Had lunch with him and headed back to the property. Grabbed a couple of lawn chairs, a folding table from my house, and my attorney brought a laptop and a printer. If you know my attorney, I've known him for decades, and he is no bullshit. Let's get it done, no mercy kind of guy, right from law school. Went from corporate IP to family law and dabbles in real estate. Good guy to know. 2:55 rolls around and they show up. The lawyer and 2 board members, one who looks like he should move to God's waiting room, and the other a mid-50s kind of guy who's probably an orthodontist. We all make introductions and sit, and I say, this is how this is gonna go, you want this property, and I want to sell. I'm tired of the games and the non-responsiveness. In the next 15 minutes, you're going to buy this property pending approval, the Hoa board majority, and you can do whatever you want with this place. You'll own it free and clear yourself. The orthodontist speaks and attempts to say, as conveyed to us by past board members, that your father advised us that the property would automatically be transferred to the Hoa upon your parents' death. He actually sounded articulate and with some authority. I like him. Me? What docs do you have to support that? Ortho. Nothing, just witnesses. It goes into a discussion on how it was told to them by board members and that their unresponsiveness was because they thought they were in the clear and no reason to work with me because it was all legal, blah blah, and they were going to get the property by some court decree shortly. I look over to my attorney and he looks back. Well, fortunately for you, that's at least 50 true, you'll get this property. But it's not free. Brass tacks, XXXXXX.0. You pay all closing costs and you'll have my signature the minute you have approval. We'll facilitate the docs and the routing wire information. The eyes of the crypt keeper and the ortho went wide, and he said that's a lot of money. We'll have to bring it to the board to vote, but I am unsure. Good enough for me. We have some preliminary docs and an official letter to present. Looked over at my attorney and was printing the docs away on the table. The lawyer says, well, it'll take up to 30 days, and the bank check will take as long for an entity of this type if this is approved. My attorney says the best thing I heard in a long time, love you, Mark. We have e-file capability, with 3-day turnaround filing to the state. Townsend wire transfers take no more than 15 minutes unless the feds are backed up. There's no title issue, no liens, no environmental or waste removal issues. It's yours to enjoy as you see fit. I'll be available right after the HAA meeting to file the docs on Tuesday to receive the transfer. That's why he gets paid. He hands over the doc standard P&S with the amount just typed in with our cover letter for the board. I grab the ortho's business card apparently. He's a school admin, the other guy is a retired electrician, and the attorneys as well. Well, the board meeting went well. I was told by a resident that it was a lot of arguing about not having documentation, wanting to actually challenge my ownership of the estate of property in court, and eventually the amount. Yeah, I asked a lot, but then again they could have countered and didn't. It was not a good meeting, but in the end it was approved. Apparently, another lawyer who was a resident basically told them they had no standing and I could do whatever I want with it, with or without the board's approval. I don't know if the Hawaii lawyer was there. My lawyer dropped by 10:15 p.m. at a pub 99, and I signed the docs for the final PS, and we had beers as he filed online. He said I would get a copy in a week and would file paper copies with the town, but the deal is done when the money is transferred. Today, 8:15, I'm a message that the HOA initiated a wire transfer, and around 8:45 got confirmation of receipt of funds. My parents bought the place in DC 1980 for $28,500. It served us well, and I flipped it for nearly 27 times that. It was a good home, but you have to move on. It'll be built or turned into a park or something. But alas, it's over and done with. Most of it is going to my kids' college and technical school tuition, and the rest to my sister for her kids. Thanks, Dad. Relevant comment. Not so much a comment as a summary. There is some amount of disbelief as to the truth of this story. Though it's not enough that I would even tag this as a possible fake. Oop is also a bit of an asshole, which may incline some to believe. At least want to believe that he's also a liar. Story 2. Am I the asshole for not wanting anything to do with my brother, even after he tried to delete himself? I, 27 male, haven't spoken or seen my brother Kevin in 5 years. I barely speak to our parents or anyone in the family. When I was 22 and Kevin was 25, I found out that my girlfriend of 3 years was having an affair with Kevin. I broke up with her and moved back into my parents' place, showing my parents the proof of the affair. After a month of ignoring Kevin's attempt to reach out and being cold when he would come around to apologize, my parents told me it was time to forgive him. They even went as far to stage an intervention with my ex Kevin and extended family to give me reasons why I should forgive them, especially Kevin. All this did was hurt me more. I told him what they did was unforgivable, especially when it came to Kevin because he was my brother. I looked up to him. I would have done anything for him. We were really close, and he betrayed me in the worst way. A couple months after that, I got the chance to get far away from them and took it. I went no contact with Kevin and my parents. For the last couple of months, I've been in contact with a cousin, because my grandmother has been having health issues, and it got worse, so I went back to visit her in the hospital. On the way out, I unfortunately ran into Kevin. He wanted to talk, but I pretended I didn't know him, and he started to cry saying he was sorry, and he wanted to have a relationship. I told him he must have me mistaken for someone else and left. My cousin then called me later, saying Kevin has a really bad mental breakdown about what happened. Apparently ever since I cut contact with him, his mental health has declined a lot. Then my parents called me and begged me to see Kevin. That being there for him would give him a peace of mind. They pressured my cousin into giving them my number. I told them I wasn't going to do that. Mom started crying saying she wanted her family back, that she wanted her sons being close again. I told her that Kevin, her and Dad ruined that I didn't care about them anymore. My dad then asked if we all sat down, talked and apologized for all the hurt we caused each other, that things could be the way they were before. I said I didn't want to talk and I have nothing to apologize for. The next day, my dad called and I could tell he was crying. He said Kevin tried swallowing a bunch of pills. Apparently they told Kevin what I said, and it pushed him over the edge. My parents found him in time, and now he's in the hospital. They think I can make his mental health better if I just have a relationship with him again, but I don't want one. I don't feel it's fair to put his mental health on me. I don't even know how I would even help him when every time I think of him, all I feel is rage, hurt, and betrayal. He's my brother, but I just don't want nothing to do with him. So am I the asshole for not wanting anything to do with my brother? Update. First of all, I want to say thank you for everyone's advice and how they experienced similar things and how they dealt with it. I know I didn't reply much, but I read everything, so thank you so much. First things first, a bunch of people were saying I should thank Kevin for saving me from my ex-GF, which is really horrible because he's my brother, not some random dude. No, I don't want Kevin to die. I just don't want a relationship with him. I was going to propose to my ex. My brother knew this. He knew how much I cared about her, so yeah, I'm not thankful towards him at all. I still talk a good bit of my extended family, especially my grandparents. I'm also in therapy too. On to the update. Kevin actually didn't try to commit suicide, but he had a really bad mental breakdown which led my parents to take him to the hospital. My parents decided to tell me he tried to commit suicide to get me to see him because they believed that I could help him. Kevin is okay now, but he'll be closely watched because he is suicidal. I don't know if he's getting the help he actually needs, or if my parents are just keeping him home. How I found this out was from my Uncle Ray. He called me because my mom rang crying to him after their plan didn't work and told him everything, so he called me after he found out. I then called my parents and told them any chance we had at reconnecting was none. Not only did they lie about what happened to Kevin, they used him as a pawn, which hurt him more than anything. That they are sick in the head and need help. They tried to explain that they only wanted to get their family back together, that they missed how close Kevin and I used to be. I told them that would never happen, especially because of what they did, that Kevin didn't need me, he needs professional help. My dad then screamed at me, saying it's my job as his brother to help him, that I'm supposed to be there for him no matter what, that Kevin loves me, but made a mistake that he shouldn't be punished for. My mom then started agreeing with Dad, saying it was time for me to come home and be a happy family again. I told them I was done and never to contact me again. They started calling me days on end, but then suddenly stopped. My grandmother is out of the hospital and back home. She's the reason the calls stopped. I didn't tell her anything that's going on because I didn't want to stress her, but she found out through Ray. According to Ray, when he told her what had been happening, she demanded him to take her to my parents' house. Then she ripped them a new one that they started crying, especially Dad since it's his parents. She told them they wouldn't no longer be a part of this family, even though they were barely a part of it anyways. She also went to see Kevin and told him that he needs professional help, and if he wants it, she'll help him get it. She also told him that she would not kick him out of her life completely, but he had to fix a lot of things about himself to really be back into the family. Grandmother is also a little mad at me for not telling her what was happening. I was trying to justify it, but she hit me on the back of my head and told me it didn't matter, which made my grandpa laugh. They told me that they would make sure my parents wouldn't get through to me, and to make sure that Kevin is getting the help he needs to get better. I told them I appreciate them, but to not get so stressed, especially with Grandma coming out of the hospital. But again, a solid hit to the head shut that down. They told me as grandparents they're supposed to help their grandkids, especially the ones that really need it. Grandma went to explain that she knows the hurt Kevin has caused, but he needs help desperately, and I agreed with her. Grandpa then explained that they would help him and make sure my parents are doing right by him. They will also make sure that nobody in the family contacts me that I wouldn't want to be contacted by. My grandmother told me if I hide anything from her again, I wouldn't want to be caught by her, so no more secrets from Grandma. So that's it for now. Kevin should be getting the help he needs, and my parents are getting their asses kicked by Grandma. I'm fine with how the situation ended. I've been staying in contact with my grandparents more, and I've been talking to more family.
Jake, breakfast is ready. I called out my son's name while transferring pancakes from the skillet to a plate in the kitchen. Even in December, Phoenix mornings are crisp and refreshing. The morning sun streaming through the window cast an amber glow through the maple syrup bottle on the counter. Coming. I heard an energetic response from upstairs, followed by the sound of little feet scampering down the stairs. Then appeared my 6-year-old son Jake, wearing Spider-Man pajamas. His slightly disheveled brown hair and big blue eyes were identical to my ex-husband, whom I separated from 5 years ago. Oh my, still in your pajamas. You'll be late for school. The clock already showed 6:45. It takes 15 minutes by car to Desert Springs Elementary in the Paradise Valley Unified School District. We need to hurry to make it for the 7:30 start time. But Mom, I can't find my Spidey shoes. Jake said worriedly as he sat in his chair. His beloved Spider-Man shoes were a birthday present from his father last month. Since then, he won't go out without wearing them. Did you check the shoe rack by the door properly? Yes. Then I'll look for them. You eat your breakfast in the meantime. I gently patted Jake's head as he hesitated in front of the warm pancakes, then headed to the entryway. When I opened the shoe rack, sure enough, the red and blue Spider-Man shoes were neatly arranged on the bottom shelf. Found them. When I announced this, a relieved, "Yay," came back from the dining room. These ordinary exchanges are our daily routine. I'm Lisa Walker, a 33-year-old single mother working in accounting at Fry's Food Store, a local supermarket chain. I've always been good with numbers since high school, and after marriage and childbirth, I got my accounting certification. Now I work full-time while living with my only son and my father, who requires nursing care. Good morning, Grandpa. Jake, having finished his meal, went to peek into my father's room on the first floor. My father Thomas suffered a stroke 3 years ago, leaving his right side paralyzed and requiring nursing care. He used to be a high school teacher in the area and raised my sister Rachel and me with great dedication to education. Ah, Jake. You look energetic today. Father reached out his left hand from his seated position on the bed to pat Jake's head. The gesture was identical to how he used to pat us sisters. The home health aide, Martha, said she'll be here at 9 today. Father nodded slightly when I reported this. We use home care services on weekdays. Since my mother passed away 5 years ago, this service has been supporting our life with Father. All right, Jake, time to get dressed. At my hurrying voice, my son waved to his grandfather and bounded up to the second floor. Our morning routine is always precisely timed. Wake up at 6, finish breakfast, get ready, leave home at 7. After dropping my son off at school, my work starts from 8 until 5. My job in the supermarket's accounting department is more fulfilling than I expected. Working with numbers, which I've been good at since high school, might be my true calling. My colleagues are understanding and even allow me to check on my father during lunch breaks. After school, Jake spends time in the after-school program. Though he's not enrolled in any specific activities, I want him to value time spent playing with children his age. He has a bright and sociable personality, and the program staff evaluate him as a child with many friends. When I pick him up after finishing work at 6, he always runs up to me with a beaming smile, calling Mom. Then we head home for dinner preparation, helping Father, and checking Jake's homework. Time flows busily but warmly. Weekends revolve around taking Father to his medical appointments. Though the drive to Honor Health Scottsdale-Thompson Peak is a bit far, Father is satisfied with the treatment there. He seems to be starting to think about inheritance matters lately, but for me, his health is the primary concern. I meet with my ex-husband once a month for Jake's visitation. Our divorce 5 years ago was amicable, without any settlement payments. We maintain a good relationship, partly for Jake's sake. On the other hand, I've been out of touch with my sister Rachel for 3 years. We became estranged over disagreements about Father's care. The residential area of Paradise Valley is already starting its Christmas decorations this year. Though neighborhood relationships are modest, they're warm, and I'm proud to live in this area. While we're not wealthy, we manage to get by with Father's pension and my salary. Hey Mom, what's for dinner tonight? Jake tugged at my arm while I was lost in thought. Well, how about a rotisserie chicken from Safeway? Yay! I love that. My son's smile blows away my fatigue. I believed such simple happiness would surely continue forever. December in Phoenix sees early sunsets. After 4:30 p.m., dusk begins to settle in. In the car heading to the after-school program after work, I was thinking about tomorrow's menu. During this season, the warm light from Desert Springs Elementary School's after-school program building melts into the winter twilight. "Mom!" When Jake spotted me, he ran up with his usual beaming smile. The sound of his Spider-Man shoes tapping lightly on the floor echoed in the quiet hallway. "Today in art class, I made a dinosaur with clay. The teacher said it was really good." Holding hands, my son happily continued talking about his school day. Even after getting in the car, his stories continued with, "and then." We turned from Cave Creek Road onto Tatum Boulevard, following our usual route home. However, when our house came into view, I felt my spine freeze. 2 police cars were parked in front of the house. The words, "Phoenix Police Department," glowed blue in the twilight. 2 uniformed officers and a man and woman in plain clothes appeared to be waiting by the front door. "Look, police officers." Jake pointed curiously. I pulled the car over to the curb with stiff hands and turned off the engine. My heart was pounding violently. I had a feeling that something terribly wrong was happening. When I got out of the car, the woman in plain clothes stepped forward. Showing her badge, she announced in a cold voice, "Mrs. Lisa Walker. We're here to arrest your son Jake on suspicion of theft." My mind went blank. There must be some mistake. My voice was trembling. I unconsciously tightened my grip on Jake's hand. "Mom, that's not true." My son cried out tearfully. His voice made my heart feel like it was shattering into 1,000 pieces. The other plainclothes detective held out a smartphone. It showed security camera footage from the Target Superstore in Paradise Valley Mall. On the screen was indeed a boy who looked exactly like Jake. The same Spider-Man shoes. The same height. The same hairstyle. I couldn't find words. "We've confirmed 3 incidents between December 1st and 15th. The female detective continued matter-of-factly. "The total value of stolen goods exceeds $5,000. The main items are a limited edition Dragon Quest Masters gaming console worth $500, a complete set of rare figures worth $2,000, and various games and toys totaling $2,500. But that's..." Beside me, Jake was trembling slightly. Multiple classmates have testified to receiving the stolen items. Additionally, all crimes occurred between 3 p.m. and 4 p.m., coinciding with the after-school program's free time. "No. I didn't." The male detective cut off Jake's desperate voice. "The shoe prints also match. We'd like to discuss this matter in detail at the station." During the drive to North Mountain Precinct following the police car, my mind was in chaos. I need to contact Father. I need to tell Martha, the home health aide, I'll be late. A lawyer. Various tasks kept surfacing and disappearing in my mind. The police station was wrapped in an unusual tension. When we were shown to the interrogation room, the female detective's attitude suddenly softened. Probably considering Jake's age. However, the male detective maintained his stern expression. "Jake, would you like to talk to us?" The female detective spoke gently. But my son, clinging to me, just shook his head vigorously. His tear-stained cheek touched my arm. "If you tell us the truth, we'll be as accommodating as possible." The male detective pointed to the security camera photos spread on the desk. 3 photos. Indeed, they all looked exactly like Jake. But no, I didn't do it. Jake's cry echoed through the stark interrogation room. While holding my son's shoulders, I was thinking desperately. Searching through memories. True, Jake had recently become interested in games. But I don't remember him begging for a new game console. And the figures. May I call a lawyer? Finally regaining my composure, I made this request. The female detective nodded slightly. Of course. In the meantime, we'll check your child's belongings. The contents of his backpack were carefully examined one by one. Textbooks. Notebooks. Lunch bag. All just normal elementary school items. Outside had completely darkened. Under the harsh fluorescent lights of the police station, I held my son tightly. Was this a nightmare? If I woke up, would our normal daily life, wrapped in the scent of morning pancakes, return? But reality was mercilessly bearing down on us. The interrogation room door opened, and our waiting lawyer, Joseph Martin, entered. He was a veteran lawyer introduced through father's acquaintance. He approached us with a calm expression and first gently patted Jake's head. It's okay, Jake. I'll definitely help you. At those words, Jake's trembling seemed to ease slightly. Attorney Martin turned to face the police and first requested that no further questioning be conducted today, arguing that late-night interrogation was inappropriate for a first-grade elementary student. Let's set up a discussion tomorrow. Tonight, please let this child go home. After some deliberation, the detectives permitted us to go home. However, with the condition that we return to the police station at 10 a.m. tomorrow. When we left the station, the cold night air touched our cheeks. Jake, who got into the car, was still trembling slightly. His reflection in the rearview mirror had completely lost his usual bright expression. Hey, Mom. Yes. Do we have to go back to that place tomorrow? I couldn't answer my son's trembling question. I could only squeeze his hand tightly. While driving through the quiet residential streets of Paradise Valley, my head was filled with questions that kept surfacing. Why did this happen? Why did my son have to face such suspicion? And above all, how could we overcome this situation? The next morning, when I called Desert Springs Elementary School, Principal Anderson's voice was cold. Mrs. Walker, I'm very sorry, but we'd like Jake to stay home until this situation is resolved. The businesslike tone made my heart constrict. But nothing has been proven yet. Multiple students have testified to receiving expensive games and figures from Jake. We're receiving many complaints from parents. Receiving students. I desperately searched my memory. Going through Jake's close friends one by one. Who, under what circumstances, would have given such testimony? Could you tell me the names of the children? I'm sorry, but since this is an ongoing investigation. After hanging up the phone, I collapsed onto the living room sofa. Outside the window, the morning sun was shining as usual. But I had a sensation of the world's colors gradually fading away. Mom. A small voice came from the top of the stairs. It was Jake. Last night he had woken up from nightmares multiple times, finally falling asleep only towards morning. In his pale blue pajamas, he looked at me anxiously. "Don't I have to go to school?" I couldn't answer that question. Instead, I went up the stairs and held him tightly. His small body was trembling slightly. I explained the situation to my supervisor Margaret and took some time off. "Lisa, I know your son. I can't believe he would shoplift. Take as many days as you need to get to the bottom of this." Her voice over the phone carried warm consideration. Encouraging messages kept arriving from colleagues too. "Let me know if there's anything I can help with. We believe in Jake." However, the reaction from the neighborhood was the opposite. Mrs. Brown from next door, whom I met while taking out the morning garbage, clearly avoided eye contact with me. The greeting we used to always exchange was now just a small murmur into empty space. Martha, who comes to care for father, seemed to have heard the neighborhood rumors too. Everyone seemed surprised that this happened in such a quiet residential area. Her expression as she conveyed this indirectly made me feel unable to stay there. 5 years since starting our life in Paradise Valley. Now, my son and I were gradually becoming isolated from the community we had finally gotten used to. The second police interview. This time we were allowed to examine the security camera footage in detail. Indeed, a boy who looked exactly like Jake. But something felt off. The way he walked. His expression. At this time, my son should have definitely been in after-school care. There should be records, right? However, the detective coldly stated that the video timestamp completely matches the after-school program's free time. 3 incidents. Thursday, December 1st, Thursday the 8th, and Thursday the 15th. All between 3 p.m. and 4 p.m. After returning home, I wrote out a timeline in my notebook. Evidence of alibis. Unnatural points. Noting down concerning aspects one after another. I also requested verification of the security camera footage. But they said results wouldn't come immediately. The hardest part was seeing Jake's condition. "Hey Mom, will Santa still come this year?" With just a week until Christmas, there was no hope in my son's voice. During what should be an exciting season, Jake became increasingly withdrawn to his room. He stopped wearing his Spider-Man shoes. Calls from friends gradually decreased. Even weekend visits with his father, which were previously arranged, now seemed to weigh heavily on him. I didn't do anything wrong. At night, while sleeping next to him, Jake muttered softly, "I believe you." While holding him tightly, I declared, continuing to believe in this child. That was the only certain thing I could do right now. I visited the Target superstore several times. The location of security cameras, the product display areas, and information about the students who supposedly received the stolen goods. Little by little, but surely, we had to get closer to the truth. I also consulted with the Paradise Valley Unified School District office. Mr. Blake, Jake's teacher, testified about his usual behavior. He's a bright and honest student. I've never seen him bully others or tell lies. But now, even those words couldn't change the situation. Cars passing in front of our house clearly slowed down to observe us. Anonymous letters of criticism began to appear in our mail. Should we move away? We also needed to consider placing father in a care facility. However, there were things to do before that. The footage of the incidents, the students who received the goods, and the existence of a boy who looked exactly like Jake. I will definitely unravel these mysteries. The situation changed when that phone call came. Mrs. Walker, this is Phoenix PD North Mountain Precinct. We've found new footage. Could you come immediately? When I arrived at the police station, that female detective was waiting. The monitor showed footage from a different angle at the Target superstore. This is from a security camera near the emergency exit at the back of the store. It's filmed from a different location than the previous footage, but the footage clearly showed a boy who looked just like Jake. But this time, he wasn't alone. A woman in a suit was holding the boy's hand. And more than anything, this child's walk is different from Jake's. I couldn't help but exclaim. The boy in the footage had a slight limp in his right foot. Though he wore the same Spider-Man shoes, his movement was clearly different from Jake's. Actually, we also received photos from a shopper. The photo the detective presented showed a clear profile of the woman. A familiar profile. But it was my sister, who had been out of contact for 3 years. Rachel. The moment I spoke that name, all the pieces started falling into place. The police quickly changed the direction of their investigation. Rachel Walker. My sister, who had cut off contact 3 years ago over disagreements about father's care. And she had a son, Daniel, the same age as Jake. When school photos were obtained, the striking similarity between Daniel and Jake became apparent. Eyes shaped like father's. Nose bridge like mother's. They looked so identical, it was hard to believe they were just cousins. What proved decisive was the re-questioning of witnesses. Actually, the toys were given to me by a lady I didn't know. One student nervously began to speak. He said she approached him in the parking lot, saying, "I have something nice for you." But she told me to keep quiet. I was scared. Similar testimonies began to gather. Rachel had been systematically distributing stolen goods to Jake's classmates. Moreover, she had carefully chosen when to do it. On Thursdays, there's free time in after-school care, so Jake could slip out. Meticulous preparation to make it seem that way. Making her son wear the same Spider-Man shoes, committing crimes at the same time. Silencing the children who received the goods, to use as evidence later. Everything was planned to frame my son. And Jake's alibis were verified one after another. During Thursday free time, Jake was always in the art room playing with clay. The after-school care instructor testified. At the time shown on the security cameras, my son was definitely inside the school. Rachel had been living about 30 minutes by car from father's house. After her divorce, she had been moving between part-time jobs due to financial difficulties. And she had been harboring resentment towards me for taking sole responsibility for father's care. Let me help with dad's care too. I should have rights to the house too, shouldn't I? That's what my sister had demanded 3 years ago. But by then, father was already accustomed to living with me and strongly refused to change his environment. After that, Rachel suddenly cut off contact and moved away. Mounting financial struggles. Late child support payments. and anxiety over inheritance rights to father's house. All of these had cast shadows on my sister's heart. The arrest was carried out quietly. Rachel offered no resistance and admitted to all charges. Her son Daniel had just followed along, told he would get games, without knowing his mother's plan. My sister takes everything. Her words in the interrogation room left me speechless. I never knew my own sister's hatred ran so deep. When the truth of the incident came to light, circumstances changed rapidly. Desert Springs Elementary School officially approved Jake's return. Principal Anderson personally offered words of apology at a school assembly. We now know that Jake did nothing wrong. Let's all get along well again. Classmates gradually began to speak to Jake again. Tentatively, but with genuine kindness. Even the children who had received the goods came to apologize with their parents. The neighborhood's attitude changed too. You've been through so much. I'm truly sorry. Mrs. Brown came to visit with a homemade chocolate cake. Our warm relationships began returning one by one. When we got home, Jake was wearing his Spider-Man shoes for the first time in a while. Mom, can I go to the park? His voice had regained its lost vitality. On Christmas Eve night, we were quietly embracing in front of the living room tree. Father joined us in his wheelchair, sharing this small family moment. Outside, stars twinkled in the Paradise Valley night sky. The painful days we'd been through seemed to fade away like a bad dream. Rachel's arrest was carried out that evening. When Phoenix PD investigators surrounded her apartment, she seemed to have already realized everything. I'm sorry. Just before being handcuffed, she whispered softly to me. Her eyes mixed hatred, regret, and deep exhaustion. Daniel, standing beside her, stood dazed, unable to comprehend what was happening. I'll take care of Daniel. How painful it was to say those words. But I felt it was my responsibility as a sister and an aunt. During the trial after indictment, all the truth came to light. After her divorce, Rachel had accumulated debt from financial hardship and pinned her hopes on inheritance rights to father's house. However, she felt those hopes were dashed when father chose to live with me. The defendant is hereby sentenced to 2 years imprisonment, suspended for 4 years, for charges of theft and exploitation of a minor. Rachel kept her head deeply bowed as the verdict was delivered in court. Afterward, she entered a rehabilitation program and began receiving counseling. Daniel temporarily stayed at a children's home but was arranged to spend weekends at our house. Christmas morning, 2 red boots were placed in the living room. One for Jake and one for Daniel. The 2 children were initially shy and kept their distance, but gradually warmed up to each other while opening presents. Hey, Mom. Jake looked up at me while spreading out his presents. Will Aunt Rachel be able to spend Christmas with us again someday? That innocent question made my eyes well up. Indeed, the wounds were deep and would take time to heal. But I too secretly hoped for the day when we could gather again as a family. Father watched silently from his wheelchair. Quiet tears glistened in his eyes. As the new year arrived, tranquility returned to Paradise Valley. But it was different from before, carrying a gentler air. Though wounded, we had found stronger, deeper connections. While slipping Santa's letter into the red boots by the entrance, I found myself praying. May we spend next Christmas with Rachel too. And may this family's wounds heal, little by little. In the quiet residential neighborhood shrouded in morning mist, the maple tree in my garden casts shadows as it catches the gentle spring sunlight. This tree, which George and I planted 30 years ago when my husband was still young, has grown splendidly and watched over our family's history. I've been living alone in this house since I lost my husband 5 years ago. But I hardly have time to feel lonely, as my son Michael and his family never fail to visit every weekend. Grandma. An energetic voice echoes from the entrance. It's William, my grandson. He's a boy with surprisingly mature eyes for a 7-year-old and a pure, captivating smile. He always looks forward to visiting my house with genuine excitement. William, no running. Michael's voice follows. Despite his busy days as a middle manager at an IT company, he always makes time for family. His conscientiousness and devotion to family have remained unchanged since childhood, one of his best qualities. Mom, we're here again today. Next to arrive is Caroline, Michael's wife. Working at an advertising agency, she always appears with perfect makeup and stylish clothes. While her surface-level pleasantries are impeccable, I wonder if I'm the only one who feels a certain emotional distance that never quite bridges. Michael and Caroline met in college and married right after graduation. Back then, Caroline wasn't as ambitious as she is now. They seemed like the ideal young couple at first. However, as Caroline's work became more demanding, I noticed a gradual distance growing between them. Lately, she's been avoiding family time, citing important meetings and deadlines. As a pediatrician for many years, I've treated countless children. I believe I understand children's psychology well. I don't miss the occasional lonely expression behind William's innocent smile. Grandma, can I play in the garden today? William especially looks forward to playing in the garden. Under the maple tree, I share stories about our family's past memories with my grandson. Sometimes, I tell him heartwarming stories from my time as a doctor. William listens intently, his eyes sparkling with interest. Of course, dear. But first, let's have our tea time. Sunday afternoon tea time, it's our precious family tradition. Homemade scones and tea are laid out on the table. William happily puffs his cheeks as he reaches for his favorite chocolate cookies. Meanwhile, Caroline never lets go of her smartphone. I notice her expression subtly changing each time she checks her screen. Lately, I've heard the name David Thompson, an investment banker, mentioned several times. She says he's an important client of the advertising agency, but my intuition senses something else. David is known in the industry for his ambitious and ruthless personality. I recently learned he has a 7-year-old son with another woman. That child is the same age as William. I wonder if Michael has noticed the changes in his wife. Recently, I've been concerned about the dark circles under his eyes. He seems more pensive than usual. I worry he might be struggling with something, but my son has always tended to keep his problems to himself. Mom, I need to get going. Michael stands up as usual. Caroline says, I'll stay a bit longer, and brings up some work-related matter again. However, her eyes don't meet mine directly. As a former pediatrician and as a mother, I can't ignore the sense of unease floating within this family. Yet at the same time, I've tried to trust and accept my son's chosen partner. I believed that was my duty as a mother. Outside the window, the maple tree sways gently. The evening sun filtering through its leaves gradually changes color. Countless family memories sleep beneath this tree. However, I was beginning to sense that behind this peaceful daily life, something unknown was definitely progressing. That day, the cold rain had been falling since morning. When I woke to the sound of rain hitting the windows and stood in the kitchen to make my usual cup of tea, the phone rang. The clock showed 7:45 a.m. My hand trembled slightly as I picked up the receiver. It was the police. "Mrs. Baker, your son Michael Baker has been in an accident. Please come to Greenwich Hospital immediately." In that moment, my vision distorted. It was as if the world suddenly lost all its color. When the ambulance arrived, he was still conscious. The officer's voice grew distant. I grabbed my bag and headed straight for the entrance. The rain had grown stronger, but I didn't even have the presence of mind to open an umbrella. The drive to the hospital. Each time I stopped at a traffic light, I felt like my chest would collapse. As a pediatrician, I had seen many critical patients. That experience only made me imagine the worst possible scenarios. My heart leaped at every turn at an intersection, at every sound of a siren. "Please, Michael." I arrived at the hospital with a prayer in my heart. The familiar smell of disinfectant seemed unusually strong that day. While waiting for the elevator, my legs wouldn't stop shaking. "Mrs. Baker. This way, please." A young nurse at the nurse's station quietly guided me. Her expression seemed to already bear the worst outcome. "I'm very sorry. We did everything we could, but..." The doctor's words echoed in the white hallway. I leaned against the wall, nearly collapsing. As a doctor, I had delivered bad news to families many times. But I never imagined I would be on the receiving end. The details of the accident are still under investigation, but the road was wet from the rain. The doctor continued explaining, but his words didn't reach my ears. I just kept calling my son's name. I tried calling Caroline multiple times. But I couldn't get through. The voicemail played over and over. When I finally reached her, her words still ring in my ears. "I'm in an important meeting and can't leave right now. I'll definitely be there in an hour." I thought I detected a certain composure in her voice. I wanted to believe I was imagining it. She had just lost her husband, yet there was an unnatural calmness in her voice. A week passed, and the day of the funeral arrived. Mourners dressed in black quietly gathered at the church. As the scent of white lilies wafted through the air, I stood at the front, bowing to each person. Relatives from our hometown, Michael's colleagues, my former co-workers, deep sorrow was etched on each of their faces. Caroline was perfectly made up, dressed in a black Chanel suit. She was crying. But somehow it seemed theatrical. She even showed gestures of checking her smartphone occasionally. I tried to dismiss such thoughts. Perhaps grief was distorting my mind. In a corner of the venue, I noticed an unfamiliar man. It was David Thompson. Why was he here? Would a mere client appear at such a private occasion? William didn't seem to fully understand his father's death. Still, his usual brightness was subdued, and he watched the mourners with an adult-like expression. His small frame in the black suit was painfully touching. Suddenly, a small hand grasped mine. Warm. Alive. That sensation stirred my heart. "Grandma," William whispered to me, his voice almost lost among the quiet murmur of the mourners. But his words pierced my heart sharply. "Dad told me to dig under the maple tree in the garden." Those words made my body freeze. A chill ran down my spine. "William, when did Dad tell you this?" I asked with a trembling voice. William's innocent eyes looked straight at me. Those eyes were just like Michael's. "The night before the accident. Dad came to my room and said, 'Make sure to remember.'" At that moment, something froze inside me. Had my son sensed something coming? Or, as my thoughts began to reach that conclusion, I felt terror rising from deep within. After the funeral, as night fell, I couldn't sleep at all. Outside the window, the rain had started falling again, as if to remind me of that day. Listening to the rain, I imagined my son's final moments, my chest tightening repeatedly. The next morning, before dawn, I went out to the garden where the maple tree was wrapped in morning mist. The scene from 30 years ago when George and I planted this tree came back to me. My young husband's smile. Little Michael enjoying playing in the dirt. Those memories overlapped with the current reality, tearing at my heart. I picked up the shovel. The first dig took the most courage. The rain-soaked earth was heavy, making it difficult to dig. My gloved hands gradually transmitted the cold sensation of the soil. But William's words drove me forward. "Make sure to remember." Why didn't Michael tell me directly? Why did he tell his 7-year-old son? Questions kept arising. He could have contacted me by phone. He could have sent an email. But he entrusted his final words to his pure-hearted child. After digging for about an hour, my arms were tired and sweat beaded on my forehead. Then, the shovel hit something. A dull sound. My heart raced. When I put my hand in the soil, I felt something cold. A waterproof case. My hands trembled as I pulled it out. I was certain that inside this case was something my son had risked his life to convey. But at the same time, I felt afraid of knowing the truth. Opening this lid might dramatically change our lives. The morning sun began filtering through the maple leaves, as if to illuminate the truth that was about to be revealed. The mud-covered waterproof case felt heavy in my hands. I lifted it with trembling hands. It was heavy. But this weight felt like more than just physical. It was the weight of the truth my son had risked his life to tell me. As I placed my hand on the lid, a moment of hesitation crossed my mind. Back in the living room, I placed the case on the table. The morning sun streaming through the window illuminated its black surface. Taking a deep breath, I slowly opened the lid. The first thing I saw was a white envelope. It bore my son's handwriting, "To Mom." Beneath it were multiple documents stacked together. And a silver USB drive. I took out the letter. The sound of breaking the seal echoed in the quiet room. "To Mom. If anything happens to me, please open this case. You may be shocked to learn the truth, but William is my son. Even though we're not blood related, I've loved him for these 7 years. But I can't leave him with Caroline. Please look at the enclosed evidence to understand why. Michael. My hands shook so much I dropped the letter once. The words, "not blood-related," echoed in my mind. Opening the documents beneath, I found DNA test results. I was familiar with reading these types of test results. However, at this moment, no professional knowledge was necessary. The result was clear. William was not Michael's biological child. Next, I found a photograph. Caroline and David in an intimate pose. It was dated 7 years ago. Before William was born. Beneath it were more photos stacked together. Evidence showing their relationship had continued for over 7 years. The most shocking was the existence of one particular photo. David with another 7-year-old boy. The child's expression somewhat resembled William's. On the back was a date and the words, "with my son." A child the same age as William. The truth was gradually taking shape. With trembling hands, I inserted the USB drive into my computer. There I found evidence my son had meticulously gathered. Email exchanges. Phone records. Bank transaction histories. And the most terrifying discovery, messages suggesting Caroline and David's plan to murder disguised as an accident. Caroline's words, "I absolutely can't leave the meeting," came back with new meaning. Creating a perfect alibi. It had been part of the plan. Before calling the police, I reviewed all the evidence once more. The composure I had cultivated over years as a doctor came in handy at this moment. Don't let emotions take over, first organize the facts. While explaining the situation at the police station, my voice was surprisingly calm. The detectives examined the evidence with serious expressions. They particularly focused on the email exchanges from the morning of the accident. "Mrs. Baker, let us check the security camera footage near the accident site." I nodded at the detective's words. The monitor showed a rain-soaked mountain road. Michael's car enters the frame. And then, right after, a black SUV approaches rapidly, while another car closes in from behind. My son would have had no way to avoid it. The driver was undoubtedly David Thompson. We can confirm the car behind was Caroline Baker's. The detective's voice rang cold. Furthermore, the owner of a nearby coffee shop provided eyewitness testimony. They had seen a black SUV and a silver car waiting just before the accident. So it was a premeditated murder. The detective nodded gravely at my question. As the truth came to light, my emotions swayed complexly. Deep love for my son. Anxiety about William's future. And anger toward Caroline and David who had plotted this deliberate murder. However, what stayed with me most were the words from my son's letter. "William is my son." My son knew there were things more important than blood ties. I must absolutely protect that sentiment. As I left the police station, there was a faint light in the sky. As if the long dark night was finally breaking. A quiet but certain resolve was growing within me for the new battle ahead. A week after submitting the evidence to the police, the investigation progressed rapidly. The detectives analyzed the security camera footage in detail and conducted thorough interviews around the scene. Then, decisive evidence was found. "Mrs. Baker," the detective's voice was filled with certainty. Arrest warrants have been issued. That evening, Caroline and David were arrested at their respective workplaces. The evening news showed Caroline being led away in handcuffs from the advertising agency office. Under her perfect makeup, her expression was cold as ice. "I did nothing wrong. I just wanted to be happy." Her words at the time of arrest still ring in my ears. 3 months after the incident, in a courtroom where autumn was beginning to make itself felt, all the truth was revealed. The prosecutor presented evidence one by one as the gallery watched with bated breath. The defendants Caroline and David Thompson murdered victim Michael Baker under a carefully crafted plan. The prosecutor's voice echoed through the silent courtroom. The screen displayed detailed diagrams of the accident scene. Friday, March 15, 2024, 7:30 a.m. A single-lane mountain road in the suburbs. The details of that day were meticulously explained. David's black SUV lay in wait along the victim's commute route. Simultaneously, Caroline pursued from behind in another vehicle. On the sparsely populated mountain road, they sandwiched him and forced him off the cliff. The security camera footage played. The misty mountain road. Michael's car entering the frame. Then the black SUV and silver car. My son had no chance to escape. Watching the footage, I felt my chest tighten imagining my son's terror in that moment. Furthermore, to make it appear as an accident, the defendants erased brake marks at the scene. Caroline deliberately delayed her arrival at the hospital citing an important meeting, among other perfect alibi preparations. Evidence was presented one after another. Caroline and David's email exchanges. Phone records. Bank transaction histories. And the beginning of their relationship was revealed. 7 years ago, Caroline met David during a major advertising agency project. Attracted to his position, wealth, and ambition, she quickly began an affair. At that time, I believed my son was living a happy married life. Behind that, betrayal had already begun. Michael wasn't enough for me. He lacked ambition. Caroline's testimony in court drew sighs from the gallery. Her voice showed not a hint of regret. The motive for the crime gradually became clear. Michael had begun to notice the truth. The DNA test results. Evidence of the affair. And the most shocking fact, William was actually David's child. Moreover, David had another child of the same age. The existence of my son could have damaged my reputation at the company. David's testimony. He feared his son's existence would threaten his position at the company. Combined with Caroline's desire to avoid dividing assets in a divorce, the two decided on murder. The prosecution also revealed why my son entrusted the truth to 7-year-old William. Michael's phone was constantly monitored by Caroline. Emails, calls, all records were under her surveillance. Direct contact with me would have been immediately noticed. The victim Michael Baker was under complete surveillance by his wife, the prosecutor's voice rang out. However, he believed she wouldn't be suspicious of conversations with an innocent child. Furthermore, Michael's diary was found during the investigation. It contained his deep love for his son and his final decision. William will surely remember my words. An innocent child's memory cannot be erased by adult schemes. And Mom will surely understand the truth. As a pediatrician, she knows better than anyone the weight of a child's words. I held back tears in court as I heard these words. Until the very end, my son had calmly assessed the situation and chosen the most reliable method. It wasn't that I wanted to hurt the child. I just wanted to switch to a new life. Caroline refused to acknowledge her guilt until the end. Wrapped in perfect makeup and black clothing, she sat with dignity. But her eyes were hollow. Her attitude didn't change even when confronted with the facts. David, on the other hand, changed his stance partway through. Probably on his lawyer's advice. Betraying Caroline, he admitted to all crimes. He must have thought it was the only way to reduce his sentence. However, the outcome didn't change. On the day of sentencing, the courtroom was filled with unprecedented tension. Defendant Caroline Baker, the judge's voice resonated heavily. For the crimes of first-degree murder and evidence tampering, you are sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Caroline's expression crumbled for the first time. Defendant David Thompson. For the crimes of first-degree murder, evidence tampering, and conspiracy, you are sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. A deep silence fell over the courtroom. A week after the verdict, a custody hearing was held. I presented my experience working as a doctor, stable living foundation, and most importantly, my deep bond with William. My son, knowing there was no blood relation, loved William for 7 years. I want to carry on that love. The court considered both parents' imprisonment for serious crimes, along with the substantial 7-year grandparent-grandchild relationship between William and me. Full custody was transferred to me. Mrs. Baker, we entrust your grandson's upbringing to you. I bowed deeply at the judge's words. I will surely make him happy. 1 month after that promise. In the autumn twilight. William and I sit together under the maple tree. The leaves are beginning to change color, glowing in the setting sun. Grandma, do you remember Dad? William's sudden question makes my chest tighten. Those eyes are just like Michael's. Even without blood ties, 7 years of love were definitely there. My son was right. An innocent child's memory had indeed carried the truth. Of course, dear. Your dad, you know, loved you more than anything. Whether you're related by blood or not doesn't matter for true parent and child. Yes. Dad always protected me. Tears glisten in William's eyes. I quietly embrace my grandson. His small body trembles slightly. Your dad's love is proof of true parenthood. And Grandma will always protect you too. The evening light gently wraps around the two of us. The maple leaves sway in the breeze. Under this tree, our family's memories will live on forever. The truth behind the incident has been revealed, and the perpetrators have been judged. But this isn't the end. It's the beginning of a new family story. An unknown future stretches before William and me. The truth and love that my son gave his life to protect. We will continue to live cherishing these always. Under the maple tree, the autumn wind blows quietly. Tomorrow will surely bring gentler sunshine than yesterday. Believing this, we take our new step forward.
So let me start this off by saying I apologize for how long this may be. My dad passed when I was 15. Him and my mom weren't all that close by that time. So while it hit me hard, she wasn't as phased as you'd expect. I joined the military when I was 17, and in my first year out of the house, my mom remarried. I never really vibed with him, just had different personalities and such. He would often make snide remarks and tell me to man up about any inconvenience I'd be upset about. This led to spats between us, and I was often just as at fault as he was for these disagreements, though it never got too serious. I got medically discharged after a little under 5 years, and my mom and him said they'd be happy to have me back in the house. I told them it'd be brief, just until I got on my feet and got a job, and even offered to pay rent, to which they declined. About 3 days into being back home, my stepdad went alone with me, asked what he thought a fair rent would be. I was confused, but it was his house, so we came to an agreement, and I kept it from my mom, assuming he did not want her to know, as he never mentioned it around her. I never asked for anything from them, not out of spite. I just wanted to do things myself. He had a son from a previous marriage. Him and I didn't share many common interests or anything. But I never had any issues with him. I'd say we got along. The only thing is, he was given a lot from them. Paid for his schooling, paid for his car, paid for his living arrangements through college and even after. I was a little less than a year older than him, so he started college right after they married. Like I said, I didn't want or need the help, but it felt lame that he'd get all that assistance, and I was immediately asked for rent, but I digress. I moved out after 3 months, and not long after met a girl who I was crazy about, and we started dating. It was my first relationship, and I was over the moon the entire time. Like in that early relationship haze, but it was just constant. I was very nervous to bring her home. My mom and I were very close, and I always worried she'd be very judgmental of a girl I bring home. My worries ended up being unwarranted. They got along extremely well. My Gef does not have a family, really, long story, so my mom and stepdad became like that for her. Her and my mom hit it off extremely well, to the point they were hanging out just the two of them at times, and it made me extremely happy. My stepdad even really liked her, and I felt it brought us closer together, which isn't something I felt I wanted until we were. His dad abandoned his family growing up, and he put himself through school and got a nice high-paying job all by himself, which I had immense respect in him for. About a year, and I knew this was the girl I was going to marry. I told my mom and stepdad, and they both seemed extremely happy. She was practically part of the family already. My mom gave me her engagement ring my dad gave her, which she kept. The job I had didn't pay great, so I figured, even if it wasn't the ring she'd always have, it'd be a great placeholder. When I proposed, my Gef told me it wasn't a placeholder, and she absolutely loved it. I was legitimately never happier in my life. We started wedding planning, and my mom and stepdad said they'd help take care of the finances. It was the first time they'd offered to help me financially, and it really meant a lot. Fast forward to about 3 months later, I get a call from my stepdad who said I needed to come over. Felt a bit ominous, but I went over there after work. When I got there, my mom, stepdad, stepbrother, and fiancé. I saw her on the couch and could tell she had been crying. I immediately thought someone had died and went to go sit next to her when my stepdad stopped me. He started hitting me with accusations of me cheating on her for our entire relationship. I was puzzled and told everyone there I don't even text any women I'm not related to besides her. Apparently, some girl had gotten my fiance's number and told her that we were sleeping together for over a year now. But she didn't know I was in a committed relationship. She sent her screenshots of alleged conversations and knew stuff about me that a random person wouldn't know. I, like a fool, couldn't see what was happening in front of me. I was stunned, saddened, and furious. I begged her from across the room to look at my phone and see I'd never done any of that. Her and my mother were both weeping, and I started to cry. My stepdad called me every word he could think of and escorted me out of the house, while telling me if he saw me on his property again, he'd call the police. I spent the next several weeks trying to contact them to no avail. Calls, texts, voicemails, every messaging app out there, nothing. After those weeks, I got a call from my stepdad who told me to stop trying to contact her, and that I was never welcome in his house or around his family again. I tried to call my mother over this time to no avail as well. After about a month, all I got from anyone was a text from my mother saying how sad and disappointed she was. My mom didn't really have much family, so they always spent holidays with my stepdad's side. They all shunned me as well. I saw their Christmas pictures on Facebook with my ex-fiancé present and seemingly in good spirits, which crushed me. The only family I had that would talk to me at all was my dad's brother and his family. Despite that even, they all seemed wary of me too. The only one that I think truly believed me was my uncle. I don't think I'd have made it without him, honestly. He showed me what I've been missing in fatherly love, and I've never been so grateful for anyone. About 6 months after it all, I moved away from the East Coast and settled out in California, needing to get away from it all. A little less than a year after I moved, I got a call from an area code from back home, which I rarely got anymore. I picked up, and it was my stepbrother, whom I promptly hung up on. He called me back, and I ignored it, but it stuck with me all day. I decided that if he called back again, I'd pick up, which he did later that night. It was awkward, at best. He told me my fiancé was really torn up for a long time. It took her nearly a year to even start looking again for a significant other. I hadn't at all since it ended. A few months into her doing so, my stepdad encouraged him to ask her on a date, which he did. Things went awk for the first couple outings, but never really clicked apparently. He told my stepdad about that, and the idiot told him, "I didn't get rid of OP for nothing. She's a great girl. You need to figure it out with her." I almost collapsed, and it was quickly replaced with anger. Apparently, he had gotten a girl, I still don't know who, to pose as someone I had an affair with and forge some message screenshots to have her send to my fiancé. He told me he'd said it to him about a month ago, and he didn't know what to do. Apparently, it bothered him enough that he couldn't just sit on the info anymore, so he told me and said he was going to tell my mom and fiancé the next day. He called me first as a courtesy, so he knew what to say to them regarding me. I told him where I was, and that I'd appreciate it if they didn't immediately contact me, so I had some time to digest it all. That was last Tuesday. I just texted him and told him I was ready to talk to them if they wanted to, and that they could call me tomorrow. I really don't know what I'm going to say, or then for that matter. I expect some tears and a good number of apologies among other things. I don't really know if I'm ready to give forgiveness or anything like that. The only person I've told so far is my uncle, who I've asked to keep it to himself. Sorry again for how long this was. My therapist picked a shit week to go on vacation, and I needed to vent. Update 1. We'll post a longer update tonight, I think. No phone calls from anyone else yet, but a good call from my stepbrother that felt nice. I appreciate the support from everyone. I'll try to get to all the comments as well when I get a chance. Update 2. Alright, sorry for the delay. Busy day at work, and obviously a lot of other stuff on my mind. My stepbrother called me this morning and told me exactly what happened this past week. So apparently, what my stepfather said wasn't exactly what he told me. He elaborated more and said he was very careful with his words so as to not incriminate himself. Per him, heavily and very clearly implying what he did without directly saying what he did. Thing about my stepbrother is, he's much smarter than me. Instead of just walking to my mother and fiancé with that and getting into a shouting match with his dad, he took a different course that I wouldn't have thought of. He got a hold of my ex's phone and found the girl. Said it took him forever to backtrack it. He gave her a call and got her to meet him out in public. That's where it all came to head. She was a Tinder match with my stepfather, which I think pretty clearly indicates that he had been sleeping around on my mom. That irritated me even more, for obvious reasons. This girl alleges they did not sleep together. However, whether that is the truth did not matter to me. What does is my stepbrother talked to her and pulled on her heartstrings with the story and all that had happened. For the record, she clearly knew what she was doing. Maybe the time and hearing what had happened to me really shook her up, but again, it doesn't matter to me. She told him what happened. $1,000 for a phone call. That was the deal. He told her what to say and supplied the pictures of evidence. She made the call, and that was that. My stepbrother asked her if she could tell my mother and ex, and even offered to pay her again for the record. She agreed to for free, and that happened on yesterday. My stepfather is on a business trip until Wednesday, so it was the four of them there. She came in and spilled it all to my mom and ex. Stepbro said the tears started almost immediately from all three of them. After everything, he told them I was in California and that he'd tell them when I wanted to be contacted. Was before I texted him. A little backstory for you guys to try to understand some stuff about my mother and ex-fiancé. And this is in no way defending their actions, just to help some folks understand. My mother and I were inseparable after my dad passed. We were each other's rock. When I turned 16, I began to drink to kinda dull it all a bit. I told my mom we'd spend New Year's together the year I was 16 and ended up out with my friends drunk as all hell. I got a text from my mom who spent the night alone at home, and that was where we were never quite the same. She sent me a text about how sad she was all alone, and I felt like complete shit over it. I stopped drinking that day until after everything went to hell. She is the type of person to always need someone. She can't handle being alone. I think when her and my dad's love began to fade, I filled that void, and when I was growing and ended up leaving home, my stepfather filled that void. Then my ex. As I said earlier, she doesn't have a family really. She had some real trust issues due to this along with some really nasty past relationships. Despite this, she never would talk badly about past boyfriends, which I really admired. One was physically abusive, and I consider that an obvious exception. I, despite being debilitatingly shy, have been often told that I'm cute, especially by younger girls, meaning younger than me, not children. I really never liked that title, as it's not very masculine, but got over it and learned to appreciate my boyish face and how often I would blush. My fiancé is just shy of 3 years older than me. I've always preferred older girls and never given much time or thought to the girls who seemingly liked me because they were 18 to 20. This didn't stop attention, which upset my fiancé. She'd often ask why I wasn't interested in these girls, why I didn't leave her for someone younger and prettier, etc. I always found her extremely attractive, significantly more attractive than me honestly, and would always reiterate that to her, and that I never cared about any other girl. Sorry to get off track. That again, I hope brings a little insight to why I think they did what they did and believed what they believed. Again, this is not an excuse for them, nor am I really all that understanding personally. At the end of the call with my brother, he said they both wanted to call today, and I told him that it'd be fine. So I sat and waited. By about 3 p.m., I was a little confused. I started to wonder if he'd made it all up to mess with me. It really worried me, honestly. I got a text from him asking if I was all good. I said yeah, and asked if they were actually planning on calling today. He said they'd been trying for the last few hours. I'd blocked them both when I moved out west and forgotten. Why I didn't block him, I don't know. I'm thankful I didn't, though. I unblocked them both and got a call from my mom about 10 minutes later. First thing she said was I sounded different. I almost hung up right then. Took all I had to just say, yeah. She broke down immediately after that. I really thought I'd feel more. I'd be lying if I said I felt nothing, but the pain of it all just took hold of me more than her words. She asked if I'd gotten her texts. I said no. I guess she'd been trying to text over the last year, but I had her number blocked. If she really wanted to reach me, she could have. Maybe that's a little shitty, but I know it's true. I pretty much told her that I'd be willing to build some semblance of a relationship back with time, and she was happy with that. She also told me she was getting all her necessities out of the house before my stepfather got home, and she'd be filing for divorce immediately. I believe her too. She may be a poor excuse for a mother in my eyes, but she's never been someone to take half measures. I really wish I could be there to see that prick's face when he comes back to an empty home. My ex got the phone next and did the same tearful apologies my mom did. I felt a little more with her. I actually tried to get her to think and remember how many times I told her I'd never do that to her and how much I loved her. She was beside herself, and to be honest, I'm glad. We talked for about half an hour, and I really thought it was pleasant. Even though I told myself for over a year now that it'd never happen again, thought there could still be something for us. She told me she still had the ring, and it made me upset. I told her to give it to my mom, 'cause it didn't belong to either of us anymore. I could tell that really crushed her, and selfishly, I wanted it too. She asked if she could call/text me. I told her it was fine, but to not expect a prompt response either way, which she understood. Pretty much gave her the same ultimatum as my mom. Though I said any chances of us having a future relationship were very slim, she said she understood that too. I talked to my brother last and thanked him for everything he'd done. He was helping my mom get her stuff out of his father's house. He apologized for all that had happened and told me he was going to go tell the rest of the family everything as well. Them, I have no connection to and won't say a word to, I don't imagine, except my stepdad's mother. Oldest person in any of the families, and she wished me a happy birthday and Merry Christmas over the last year. Maybe she was old enough that she doesn't care. Maybe she felt bad. But I'll talk to her, odd as it is. Sorry for all the rambling. I fly home for my uncle's 60th birthday the first week of March. It'll be my first time home since I moved out here. I'll definitely plan on seeing my brother as well. I'm not averse to seeing my mom and ex, but I've made it clear to them that I've got a lot of healing to do, and so do they. If anything further happens, I'll update again, maybe after that trip home, but that looks like it for the time being. Also, this is kind of the last social media I have. I haven't been on here super often in the last year for the reasons I'm sure you could guess. I truly haven't seen any similar stories to mine that have been referenced in the comments, though I'd like to if you can find them. I'm more than happy to answer any questions anyone would have regarding this whole thing to the best of my knowledge. Thank you, everyone. Brief update. Got a call from a number back home. I deleted most of my numbers a while ago from anyone I wasn't talking with. I picked up, and it was my stepfather. He said hello, and I hung up and blocked the number. I immediately called my mom, fiancé, and brother. They're all safe, not around him. Mom is in hotel that he doesn't know about. Fiancé and brother are at their residences, and both say they feel adequately protected. He is not by any indication a violent man, but better safe than sorry. My brother said he got a call from him this morning when he got home after my mom wasn't there and wouldn't answer. Brother told him what happened and not to contact any of them. Not sure how long he sat there, but he called me around 3 p.m. Pacific. About an hour ago, I got a message from a different number saying, "We need to talk." I assume that's him. I haven't responded. That's the latest. Stepdad's mother called me. Had her number saved because of what I previously stated. Was a bit worried it may have been him trying to gather some info or something. It wasn't. She's a very sweet lady who did not have to be nice to me in any way, but has shown me compassion. She was very nice and wished me well while also apologizing on behalf of the family. I thanked her and wished her the best too. Shocking he came from that woman. Final update. All right, sorry for the delay, everyone. Work has been busy, and I just got home this past weekend. I sat on that message from what it turns out was in fact my stepfather. My curiosity got the better of me and I called him. I did do what some had suggested and recorded the call using a different app. I wish I could say the call provided me something, but that would be disingenuous. Hearing his voice made my skin crawl. He asked how I was. I told him to cut the shit, and he laughed. Nothing incriminating on his end, of course. Talk was about 3 minutes long, about nothing. I did ask him why he wasn't content with me being with her. He said I wasn't man enough, and that a woman like her would have been wasted on me. He has a very traditional way of thinking relationship-wise, which is especially funny because it shows how much he never knew about our relationship or her in general. Without going off on a tangent, my ex is pretty notably against gender norms. She has a very well-paying job and told me she'd never be comfortable being a stay-at-home mom/wife. She often took the initiative for stuff in our relationship, etc. There wasn't really much to take away from the conversation other than that. I don't really know what he wanted, but I told him not to call me again and hung up. Not very eventful on that front. I flew back home prior to the weekend last week and went to my uncle's birthday party. Had a good time, and the family was very welcoming and apologetic for not being more supportive after everything. None of them were ever rude or anything. I've got no negative feelings towards any of them. I talked with my brother and set up a meeting at his place with my ex and mother on Wednesday night. On Wednesday, I went over there and got what I expected. Lot of tears, lot of apologies. I admittedly had a tough time keeping it together. I talked with both of them and my brother all independently. Mom has already filed for divorce, which is good, and I appreciate her doing so. We had a decent conversation. You can tell it's strained, but I think we're making some progress towards healing. My brother and I had a good talk. Was nice to talk with him in person. He apologized for everything that had happened, and I accepted it. Can definitely tell he feels remorse for how it all shook out, and for the work he put in to make it right. I definitely don't hold a grudge. My ex and I had a very long discussion through most of the night. We've been talking over the phone for the last couple weeks already. A lot of it was just catching up. We're obviously two very different people now after nearly a year and a half away. We had some more serious discussions later on about everything. About how screwed up it all was and how broken I was by it all. She told me she'd already seen a therapist and asked if I would be willing to come with her to her appointment Thursday. She's gone above and beyond for everything I could have asked of her the last few weeks, and I am really truly appreciative of it. I went with her to her therapy appointment, which I feel was very productive for everyone. Her therapist seemed to be very appreciative of me being there as well. So we stayed talking for a while after, and I decided to ask if she wanted to go out Saturday night. So that's the plan right now. I don't know exactly what's going to happen, but I wanted to show her that I appreciate the effort she's putting in to try and mend what's been broken. And selfishly, I'd like to see her in a setting that isn't like the ones we've been in. So that's the update for now. Things are looking up. Haven't seen any of my stepdad or his family since getting home. Appreciate all the support from everyone. Will update with anything new. Update 3/5. Date went very well. We had a nice night together. That dinner went to an arcade after, which we used to do somewhat frequently. It's the first date I've been on in nearly a year and a half, and I enjoyed myself a lot. We went back to her place after and talked. Going to discuss the next steps during this week before I head back to California. The distance part is going to be the hardest part, but I think it'll help keep the rose-colored glasses off if we aren't either each other constantly. Thank you again for the support from everyone. A lot of folks were asking for another update. Thanks, TikTok. I have remained in contact with my brother, mom, and ex. Brother and I still talk a reasonable amount. Mom and I have been building back. Definitely some improvements there. I'm truly glad she's back in my life, even if it's going to take some time for her to really be like a mother to me again. My ex and I spent a long time trying to see what was the best way to go about things. She flew out and spent time with me in California, which was very nice. At the moment, we're not together, and I think that's best for right now. As for my ex-stepfather, I really have no clue. He tried to contact my mother a few times following everything, but he never got a chance to talk. He hasn't been in contact with me at all, and for that I'm thankful. Hope I never run into him again. Life changes. I did end up moving back east for a new job. Few states away from my family still, which I think is healthy, and happy to answer any other questions you guys might have. Thank you for all the support in this madness.
Wife's brother-in-law wants to kiss her, and she threatened with divorce if I told her sister. So, my wife and brother-in-law have been running together for the past few months. My wife told me that besides their weekend runs, they were also running during the week after work. Well, my brother-in-law was not telling his wife about all the runs, and my wife kept them secret from her sister, though I suspect she didn't tell me about all the runs. Anyways, my wife's sister somehow finds out about them running during the week and gets upset. I tell my wife I agree with her sister and that they should stop running as it is starting to get weird with the lying. I also pointed out that it seemed a little weird to be running that much together, and she commented that it was not like they were having an affair. As I think back now, over these last few months, she was very complimentary of how open my brother-in-law was on the runs, and that they could speak about everything, and how I didn't bring anything to the table. She seemingly got mad at me all the time for the smallest things, and there were frequent comments about how the brother-in-law was so great. Well, last weekend her sister got upset, and my wife said she would not run with him anymore. She explained that she ran with him since she didn't feel safe running outside alone, and that he and her ran the same pace. Her sister left it as, "Do what you want," but was clearly upset. My wife didn't run all week, but he was texting her constantly about running, and she finally agreed to go Saturday morning. She asked if I was ok with it, and I told her that I really wasn't, and it seemed strange she would go against her sister and my wishes. She commented they were just running partners, and that everyone was acting weird for no reason. Well, 1 hour later she comes flying through the door, and says he told her he wanted to kiss her, and texted the same. My wife was all upset, said she called him and said, "What are you thinking?" and that he was crazy and hung up. I was shocked that my brother-in-law would pull this and asked my wife what would have led to this, and that guys don't just say things like that for no reason. Wife denied any conversations about our marriage, issues, or anything that would have led him on. I told her I love you and believe you, and that you must tell your sister. She said absolutely not, as it would destroy her family, and that it wasn't a big deal. She got upset when I told her I wanted her to tell brother-in-law that I was aware, and said he already learned his lesson, and that would blow it out of proportion. I am very upset, told her the same, and she basically said we need to just move on and act like nothing happened. I disagreed, and she now will not talk about it, and told me that I am acting like a baby and ruining our relationship with my attitude about it. I feel like she was having an emotional affair and is not protecting him and her because she developed some sort of feelings for him. I ended up looking at our phone bill and seeing that she had multiple calls over the last couple months with him that were 10, 15, and 20 minutes long during the workday, when I'm obviously not around. Not proud of this, but I looked at her messages and took a picture of the one saying he wanted to kiss her. There were also messages about him giving her a special birthday present, and then one saying, "I assume you deleted the text before you got home, and let's just forget about this one." For some unknown reason, my wife is willing to act like this is no big deal, when in reality, it is a big deal to me. Maybe I shouldn't be upset, but I can't shake the feeling that she is not as innocent as she is putting forth. I don't believe anything physical happened, but why defend a scumbag like this and allow him to go on like nothing happened, especially when your sister is involved? I need some advice on how to handle this. Update 1. So I took some of the below advice as over dinner. My wife commented that she was glad I wasn't going to say anything to anyone and just act normal around the family. I responded that was in fact not the case, as I am still very uncomfortable and upset about what happened, and I'm not sure how I'll react. She lost her shit and started calling me all sorts of names, and that my actions are going to destroy our relationship, and I should just call her ex-wife, as she won't tolerate me disregarding her wishes. I explained that I feel it's wrong to just forget it ever happened, and that I didn't appreciate her defending and excusing brother-in-law actions. She continued yelling that she now can't trust me and won't tell me things in the future. Told me I'm going to destroy the whole family, her parents, her sister, and our lives with my not agreeing to let it go. Yelling about how dare I blame her. I made it clear I'm not blaming her and that my focus is brother-in-law actions, but she doesn't want to hear this. I'm currently getting the silent treatment. Update 2. After she stopped yelling last night and transitioned to the silent treatment, she went straight to bed upstairs. Woke up this morning and had zero conversation with complete silent treatment. Only words uttered were to call me an asshole for putting a wet towel on top of my daughter's homework. She then walked out the door for work. As an update 3, I took the last few days to think about it, and I just could not get over my brother-in-law saying this, especially in light of the phone calls and incessant texting between them. My wife was insistent the other day that if I did not just forget it, that her entire family will be destroyed, and her sister will be crushed. I told her that I would not say anything to her sister, as that was not my place. She then said that I would also not mention anything to my brother-in-law, and just go about business as usual and drop it. I told her I didn't agree and didn't know what I would do. Well, today, I am out and I see him. He acts all buddy-buddy, and I just looked at him and told him that he crossed a line and to stop contacting my wife, and don't go to my house when I'm not there. 5 minutes later, I have all these missed calls and nasty text messages from my wife saying that I destroyed the family, she can't trust me, and that I am a monster for saying anything to him. I called her, and she was screaming like a banshee, claiming she couldn't breathe and was having an anxiety attack, all because of me. She repeatedly stated she no longer had any trust in me and doesn't know if there is a future for us. She then went into how my brother-in-law was crying and all scared I was going to tell everyone, and he was now devastated for his kids. I told my wife that he shouldn't worry about that since I have no plans to tell his wife. I then stated it was wrong for her to continue defending and being concerned about his emotions when I have been crushed all week about this issue. I walked in the door to her screaming that she trusted me to not say anything and that I stabbed her in the back. I then got the, "Don't talk to me as I need to think about us and damage control going forward." I made it clear that because of her hysteria, I texted my brother-in-law and stated that the last words I will speak of this occurred today. It's on you to tell others, not me, and I don't care what you do. I told my wife that if she had no such intentions, then there is nothing that she did wrong and is just being used as a pawn in his game. It's not her fault that he decided to pull such a move. So right now, I am sitting downstairs and my wife stormed up to bed and isn't talking to me. I feel I had to say something as I was not going to play the secret game on this and have to act like nothing happened. I mean, she was commenting that he has a family and kids, to which I replied that he didn't give a damn about my family and kids when he said he wanted to kiss her, and I am sure was hopeful the feeling was mutual. So please explain why my wife doesn't understand my anger over the situation and continues to blame me. I'm upset that my wife is furious at me, but in the end, I really don't think my actions were out of line and I stand by them. Am I crazy? Maybe I just tanked my own marriage, but who wants to stay with someone when they would defend someone like the brother-in-law? Update 4. Thanks for all the great advice. I haven't taken a scorched earth policy as I don't want to blow this up in front of my kids. My one child is already asking why mom is acting out. Anyways, this morning I told my wife this is unacceptable and I'm not the bad guy and won't cover for the lies. I asked her directly if she had feelings for brother-in-law, and she exploded that she hates me, hates him. I destroyed the family and wants a divorce. She said that she isn't living her life with my threats. I made zero threats. I said I wanted to sit down and have an open and honest discussion about this tonight. She put the door to work. I left her a detailed voicemail stating that we need to sit down and talk about our options of one, seeing if this is salvageable, and option 2. If not, to discuss coming to an amicable agreement to end our marriage so the least possible damage is done to the kids. No response from her. Final update. So I spoke with my wife last night and explained the 2 options and expressed that a serious discussion was needed on what took place. She immediately lost it when I asked about whether or not she had spoken negatively about our marriage and myself to my brother-in-law. She started screaming that I have no right to interrogate her. She then deflected it back to me, destroying the family by telling the brother-in-law I knew despite her saying to just drop it. I explained that I was emotionally devastated by this and that the fact that she was lying to her sister and I was the real issue in my book. I asked if she had spoken to brother-in-law since the other day. She initially denied it, and when I pointed out that earlier in the convo she mentioned a call, she got belligerent and started with me being a monster and destroying her life. She is screaming, and I just maintained my composure and said I needed to know everything that was said and done between them in order to try and salvage our relationship. She was adamant that nothing physical ever happened. In her mania, she started saying that she needed a few days to think about what she wanted to do since I violated her trust. I told her that she does not get to direct the narrative as I am not the bad guy here, and if anyone is, it is the brother-in-law for putting her in the situation. I asked her if she loved me, and her response was that 2 days ago when she thought I wasn't saying anything that she loved me, but now after my actions she no longer does. I looked right at her and said that this means it is the end of our marriage, as I cannot reconcile a marriage where one partner no longer loves the other. She told me to go fuck myself and shut down. I commented that her actions make it appear there is much more going on than I am being told, and that I will get to the bottom of it after comparing notes with my sister-in-law. Slept in the guest bedroom, woke up this morning, got a good workout in, and she didn't make any comments before leaving for work. However, she had made my lunch, and I think it was her way of trying to break the ice. I am meeting my sister-in-law for coffee this morning to discuss, and then meeting my attorney to get the ball rolling. I'm not a doormat, nor am I the person in the wrong here. I know I will never be able to trust her again, and her actions confirm this. So thank you for all the advice,